It all begins when a girl with a very unusual stone-like appearance calls out to Jinyoung in the school hallway. He answers somewhat awkwardly, but in reality he has a very firm life motto, which is to treat women exactly as if they were stones. This mentality started back in elementary school, when Jinyoung tried to confess his feelings to girls and ended up being rejected no less than 20 times. The reasons for being rejected so many times were as varied and bizarre as possible, which only made the situation worse for the boy. With his heart completely broken by so much rejection, little Jinyoung cried a lot and didn't know what to do anymore. Having lost all his confidence, he isolated himself in his room and ended up creating an imaginary friend to ask for advice. This imaginary friend was called Jason and at first seemed like just a cute child to keep him company. That's when Jason gave him the ultimate advice, telling him to start seeing all girls as if they were stones. Jinyoung took the advice very seriously and spent years training his mind, repeating to himself that women were nothing more than rocks. And wouldn't you know it, the training worked, because when he entered high school, he started seeing all the girls' faces literally as stones. Back in the present, Jinyoung is pulled from his thoughts as that same stone-faced classmate continues talking to him. She shyly asks if he's free after class so they can study together, but Jinyoung quickly reminds her not to get her hopes up. For him, just because a girl smiles or makes a friendly invitation, it doesn't mean at all that she's interested. To avoid any further distress, Jinyoung simply says he's busy today and leaves. He says goodbye to other girls in the hallway with ease, realizing how much simpler life has become since he adopted this technique of seeing everyone as rocks. Ultimately, talking to stones is wonderful because you don't have to worry about feelings getting in the way. Proud of his philosophy, Jinyoung asks his imaginary friend if he isn't absolutely right. Jason, now an extremely muscular man with a mustache, fully agrees with the idea. Despite this, the big guy admits that he's a little worried that his friend will go through life without dating anyone because of this block. Jinyoung retorted, saying that the two had already decided to give up on this whole romance thing a long time ago. He would much rather live in peace than go through the humiliation of being rejected and called weird again. Jason accepts the boy's decision, but at that very moment of distraction, Jinyoung's cell phone ends up falling to the ground while he's walking down the street. Suddenly, a soft voice calls out to him, making the boy look back intrigued. A delicate hand appears, holding the device that had just fallen to the floor. The girl points out that he dropped his cell phone and asks if it belongs to him. To Jinyoung's surprise, the person holding the phone is an extremely beautiful and stylish girl. The boy turns around and freezes completely as he stares at her. His eyes widen, unable to comprehend what is happening there. The big question is that, for some mysterious reason, her face doesn't look anything like a stone. Jinyoung is starting to despair completely, because it's been an eternity since he's seen the real face of a real girl. His mind goes into overdrive, and he desperately tries to calm down so as not to ruin everything. The girl waits for an answer and asks why he isn't saying anything, leaving Jinyoung even more mesmerized by her beauty. Feeling the cold sweat trickling down his face, he simply can't think straight with that presence so powerful. Without thinking about the consequences, Jinyoung ends up blurting out that she's too beautiful. In that same instant, he realizes the utter nonsense he just said and is shocked by his own actions. The girl is also completely taken by surprise and is left speechless by the sudden compliment. She thanks him somewhat awkwardly, while Jinyoung internally curses himself for breaking his own golden rule. Desperate, he grabs the phone from her hand in one swift motion, shouts an apology and runs away as fast as he can. The girl stays behind watching the boy run away, completely confused about the bizarre scene. While running like a madman down the street, Jinyoung mentally curses himself for being such an idiot. He can't get over having complimented a girl he just met so directly. The boy's biggest fear now is that this slip-up will spread and become a terrible rumor at school. Later, back home, the neighborhood's tranquility masks the storm of thoughts consuming the young man. In his room, Jason tries to calm his friend down, saying that he thought his attitude was really cute, and that he even did a good job with the pickup line. Jinyoung, however, completely disagrees and sinks into despair while the big guy tries to lift his spirits. What's really puzzling the boy is the mystery of why that particular girl didn't seem like a rock like all the others. Jason says he doesn't have that answer and asks what the boy's next step will be from now on. Jinyoung is seriously worried, knowing that if he leaves things as they are, rumors will start to circulate at school. He's terrified that his childhood trauma will repeat itself, and people will go back to whispering that he's a weirdo who hits on girls. Ultimately, Jason regrets seeing his friend so desperate after so much effort and years of intensive mental training. Jinyoung cowers in the corner of the room, utterly desperate, feeling like everything in his life is ruined. To try and give the boy a reality check, the muscular Jason decides to deliver an imaginary punch right to his head. With his head throbbing, Jinyoung tries to compose himself and starts racking his brains for an emergency plan to resolve this mess. After much thought, the boy concludes that the best way to avoid problems is simply to stay out of her way. Jinyoung points out that she studies in a different classroom, which means that if he's careful, the chances of them crossing paths are minimal. Confident in his strategy, the boy convinces himself that there's no reason to panic, as long as he can maintain a safe distance from the girl. The next day, the atmosphere at school seems calm, and Jinyoung expects to have a normal, uneventful school day. But his luck doesn't last long, as the beautiful girl appears in the hallway accompanied by a colleague and immediately approaches him, asking if he remembers her. The young man is paralyzed by the unexpected encounter, unable to believe that his escape plan failed so quickly. In a panic, he cries out for help to his imaginary friend, and Jason advises Jinyoung to stay calm and act as naturally as possible. While his stone-faced classmate asks who he is, Jinyoung takes a deep breath and decides to act exactly as he does with the other stone-faced girls. But the mysterious girl ruins his plans by revealing to her classmate that Jinyoung was the one who called her pretty the day before. The stone-clad colleague reacts in shock to the revelation, while the pretty girl herself confesses that she hadn't expected it either. Feeling the weight of second-hand embarrassment, Jinyoung tries to disguise his discomfort by making a cold and indifferent comment. That's when the girl, in a provocative and charming tone, asks if she's still beautiful today, too. The friend starts laughing at the joke and calls the girl by name, revealing that her name is Jeong Seonwoo. Before the conversation could lead to more jokes, Jinyoung simply turns around and runs down the hallway, leaving Seonwoo completely confused. Now safe, the muscular Jason praises the quick escape, and Jinyoung agrees that running away was the best decision to avoid further involvement. As he walks briskly, the boy tries to convince himself that the laughter was just Seonwoo making fun of him. He carefully monitors himself to avoid falling into the mental trap of thinking that a girl so popular could actually like him. Far away, Seonwoo is intrigued by his behavior, while Jinyoung vows to himself that he will never cross her path again. Unfortunately for our protagonist, fate loves to play tricks on people and had very different plans for him. It doesn't take long for Jinyoung to notice Seonwoo in the schoolyard, standing out absurdly amidst a crowd of stone-faced girls. As soon as she spots him and waves from afar, Jinyoung goes on high alert and knows he needs to act fast. Without a second thought, he begins to abruptly change course every time he notices Seonwoo's presence. On another occasion, when she tries to strike up a conversation in the school hallway, Jinyoung walks right past her like a rocket, paying her no attention whatsoever. Even in the outer courtyard, upon hearing Seonwoo's voice calling him, the boy hides his face and quickens his pace away from there. Repeatedly ignored, Seonwoo begins to get visibly upset and doesn't understand why she's being treated so coldly. In the late afternoon, watching the sunset, Jinyoung lets out a sigh of relief for having managed to survive another day of detours and escapes. The boy walks back home exhausted from all the running around, telling Jason that he urgently needs to devise a new defense strategy. While lamenting his terrible luck, Jinyoung wonders how his peaceful school life ended up being turned upside down like this. At that exact moment, Seonwoo suddenly appears right in front of him with a terrifying and furious look. Jinyoung jumps in fright at the sudden appearance, and she asks in a sarcastic tone if she really scared him that much. The boy panics completely, not understanding how they keep bumping into each other even though he's doing everything he can to avoid her. Tired of being avoided, Seonwoo stares at him seriously and asks if he's going to run away from her again. Without hiding her indignation, she complains that she finds it unbelievable how he always pretends not to hear her when she tries to greet him. Seonwoo continues venting and asks if she did something wrong to him, since Jinyoung runs away and avoids even looking her in the eyes. Ultimately, the girl explicitly states that she finds his behavior extremely bizarre and senseless. Realizing he's created a huge misunderstanding, Jinyoung becomes internally desperate and tries to come up with an acceptable excuse as quickly as possible. Stuttering quite a bit, the boy tries to begin explaining the real reason behind his strange behavior in recent days. With his brain racing under pressure, Jinyoung tries to find the right words to avoid making things even worse. But in his haste, he ends up blurting out the most absurd truth of all, saying that all the other girls seem like stones to him except for her. Upon hearing that unbelievable statement, Seonwoo is completely stunned and stares at him in silence. Jinyoung immediately realizes the unbelievable nature of what he just said and feels like he's dug his own grave. He mentally apologizes to Jason, knowing he made the worst mistake of his life, while his imaginary friend merely laments the situation. The girl continued processing the information, her face blushing slightly at such an unusual revelation. The shame is so intense that Jinyong's hands begin to tremble, completely distraught and unsure where to hide his face. The boy broke out in a cold sweat and trembled all over, wishing that a hole would open up in the ground and swallow him up at that very moment. However, to the boy's surprise, Xianwu's serious expression slowly begins to change. The girl flashes a sweet and welcoming smile in the twilight, suggesting that the unexpected revelation may not have been a complete disaster. Still under the spell of that smile, Xianwu asks the boy's name, and he, stuttering badly, reveals that his name is Park Jinyong. Xianwu moves even closer to him and with a gentle touch, asks if he can tell him something. She leans close to his ear and whispers that what he just did was actually a tremendous pickup line. With that sudden approach, Jinyong is completely speechless, his eyes wide and his mind totally blank. In this moment of panic, he perfectly remembers the fundamental advice his imaginary friend Jason gave him in childhood. The first rule was to treat women exactly like stones, but Jinyong failed miserably by running away while Xianwu was saying goodbye in a friendly manner. The second rule told him never to raise false hopes with girls. And once again he failed, feeling his heart pound desperately as his face flushed with shame. His fertile mind begins to envision an entire future with her, from the marriage proposal to growing old together, hand in hand, in a hospital bed. Back in the reality of the room, Jason punches Jinyong to make him stop with that silly fantasy outburst. Jinyong tries to defend himself by saying it's understandable that he lost control. After all, it had been 5 years since he'd truly looked at a girl's face. He realizes that simply running away from Xianwu won't work anymore, and asks Jason what he should do to resolve the situation. The strong imaginary friend explains that in times of crisis like this, the most important thing is to set a very clear end goal. Jason recalls that the technique of viewing women as stones served to keep him calm and collected in the face of any female approach. Thanks to this mental barrier, he was able to protect himself and was never hurt or rejected by any girl again. However, Xianwu's surprise appearance triggered an unexpected side effect on the stone armor that Jinyong had built. Jason points out that Jinyong has no immunity to the face of a real girl, which ended up bringing out his most awkward and strange side. Jinyong knows his friend is right and fears things will end badly like in the past, but Jason assures him there's still a way out. The big guy claims that all Jinyong needs to do from now on is learn to maintain composure and coolness when he's around her. The next day, the school routine resumes, and Jinyong decides to put his imaginary advisor's advice into practice. As he walks down the hallway, he desperately tries to maintain a neutral facial expression, but ends up making a frightening grimace. Right at that moment, Xianwu appears, calmly walking in the opposite direction down the same hallway. Accompanying Xianwu, his friend Sujung notices the situation and comments that Jinyong is staring at the two of them with a very sinister look. Feeling watched, Jinyong asks Jason the name of that crazy plan to stare at the girl until he gets used to her presence. Jason confirms that the desensitization plan involves looking at her until she loses her nervousness, but begs the boy to at least try to give her a friendly smile. Complying with the request, Jinyong forces a bizarre smile that makes him look like a villain from a horror movie. Xianwu notices Jinyong's terrifying grimace from afar and is completely frightened, unsure what to think. Sujung, however, finds it funny and jokes that Jinyong just gave Xianwu a nice smile. The friend amuses herself by wondering if the boy thinks they aren't noticing his very obvious stares, while Xianwu observes the scene with a discreet little smile. Jinyong convinces himself that the distance prevents her from noticing his horrible grimace, while Jason confesses that he's finding that scene extremely uncomfortable to watch. Jason suggests they turn back before people start jumping to the wrong conclusions, and Jinyong agrees immediately. Xianwu watches the boy walk away, lost in thought about the whole intriguing situation. Curious about the boy's behavior, Xianwu asks Sujung if she knows who he is, and her friend promptly replies that Jinyong is quite popular with the girls. Sujung reveals that several girls have tried to start a conversation with him in the past, but that the attempts never went very well. She explains that the big problem is that Jinyong doesn't seem to have the slightest interest in girls or relationships. Sujung reflects that his mysterious and focused style, ironically, ends up attracting even more attention from the girls at school. If the boy is so reserved, his friend wonders if Xianwu became interested in him precisely because she received those looks from him. Xianwu tries to deflect the question and denies any interest, claiming it's just silly curiosity. Even though she tries to deny it, she can't get the moment when the two of them talked in the middle of the street at sunset out of her head. With a mischievous smile on her face, Xianwu admits to herself that there is indeed something about that strange boy that keeps intriguing her. At another point, Jinyong is standing in front of the classroom thinking about how to solve this dilemma and calls for Jason. He confesses to his imaginary friend that the more he reflects on the matter, the more he thinks the plan to confront her in person is a terrible idea. Jinyoung explains that the plan was to get used to her face, but to do that he would need to follow her and stare at her all the time at school. The boy realizes that acting this way would make him look like a real stalker and would end up ruining his reputation completely. Jason thoughtfully reflects on the dilemma of seeming like a weirdo or a stalker and agrees that the situation is indeed complicated. Alternatively, Jinyoung suggests that it would be much better to try looking at photos of her online, suggesting searching for her Instagram profile. Jason loves the idea and fully supports his friend, suggesting that he go talk to Seonwoo in person to ask for her contact information. Jinyoung panics at the idea of talking to her face-to-face, but Jason argues that trying to find her hidden profile would be much weirder. The boy imagines himself nervously approaching Seonwoo in the middle of the school hallway to ask for his social media contact information. However, the mere thought of seeing that beautiful girl up close already leaves him completely unsteady and breathless. To the boy's surprise, Seonwoo accepts the proposal with a charming smile on his face. Encouraged by the initial success of the plan, Jinyoung holds out his cell phone and asks her to type the username into the app herself. The girl picks up the device without hesitation and starts searching for his profile. Suddenly, she stops typing and lets out a murmur of confusion as she looks at the screen. The reason for the surprise is that Jinyoung's profile has absolutely no followers or posts, and even uses a very generic username. Intrigued, she asks if he just created that account at that exact moment, and the young man awkwardly confirms. He tries to justify himself by saying that he doesn't usually use social media, so he made a quick profile and asks apprehensively if there's something wrong with the account. Instead of answering, Seonwoo simply can't take it anymore and bursts into laughter right there in the hallway, leaving Jinyoung completely confused. Still laughing, she points out that, because she just created the profile, it means he came running to find her the exact second she finished registering. Jinyoung freezes, realizing how desperate his attitude seemed. Panic grips the young man when it dawns on him that he acted completely like a nervous wreck. While the girl continues to laugh at the unusual situation, Jinyoung internally curses himself for focusing so much on the plan that he completely forgot about common sense. Desperate and feeling that everything is ruined, he cries out for Jason in his thoughts, begging for salvation. Trembling from head to toe, he tries to claim she was just the first person he met after creating the account, feeling his strange side overflowing uncontrollably. However, Seonwoo finds all the boy's confusion adorable and flashes a charming smile. Trying to calm him down, she accepts the flimsy excuse while Jinyoung continues to sweat profusely. Playing along, the girl approaches with her own cell phone in hand and asks in a provocative tone if he wouldn't prefer her number instead. Jinyoung's eyes widen behind his glasses at such a direct advance. He tries to formulate some kind of response, but the words simply refuse to come out of his mouth. Noticing the boy's nervousness, Seonwoo gives him a friendly punch on the chest and says he's just kidding, confessing that he loves his funny reactions. She hands back the phone, saying she's already followed him back, and Jinyoung takes the device, still somewhat dazed. Seonwoo walks away down the hallway waving goodbye and asks him not to forget to like her posts. Jinyoung stands alone in the hallway, completely paralyzed and in shock at the turn of events in that conversation. The young man's fertile mind strikes again, projecting that entire imaginary film of marriage, children, and life as a couple. Jason needs to intervene again and orders him to stop with these absurd romantic fantasies immediately. Later, night has already fallen over the city, and the lights of the residential buildings begin to come on. In his room, Seonwoo relaxes comfortably on the bed while scrolling through his phone's feed. She lets out a loud laugh when she sees the first post from her new online friend. The reason for all the amusement is an absurdly awful selfie that Jinyoung posted with that same maniacal expression trying to smile, showing that he has absolutely no talent for photos. Meanwhile, in the room of the boy who is already fast asleep, the cell phone screen suddenly glows in the dark. A notification in the middle of the night informs that Seonwoo actually liked his bizarre photo. The small interaction brightens the quiet night in the residential building. The next day, the whole school seems to be gossiping, and Sujung is shocked to learn that Jinyoung had the nerve to ask for Seonwoo's social media. Seonwoo confirms the story with a laugh when mentioning the newly created profile, leading Sujung to think it's all crazy and conclude that the boy is indeed head over heels for her. The conversation continues animatedly in the classroom until Sujung decides to ask an important question. The friend asks if the rumors that Jinyoung isn't interested in anyone are really true, since he's been acting completely differently with Seonwoo. At that very moment, Jinyoung absent-mindedly walks down the hallway, and Seonwoo notices him approaching out of the corner of his eye. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she suggests Sujung conduct a small practical test to uncover the truth right there. The boy continues on his way calmly until he hears a dramatic cry right behind him and turns around to see what it is. Sujung is sitting on the floor in a cute and helpless pose, sweetly announcing that she has fallen. Pouting and with small tears in her eyes, the girl hopes to elicit some protective action from the boy. Jinyoung simply observes her with his usual blank and analytical expression, while Seonwoo anxiously waits to see if he will act like a helpful gentleman. The big problem with the strategy is that, in Jinyoung's conditioned eyes, Sujung is nothing more than another girl with a face as gray as stone, lying on the ground. With an expression of pure disgust, he grabs Sujung by the hood of her coat and lifts her into the air without the slightest gentleness. Without saying a single word of comfort, Jinyoung turns his back on the indignant girl and continues walking down the hallway checking his phone. Witnessing the utter fiasco of his friend's attempt to gain sympathy, Seonwoo can't contain himself and bursts into laughter. She laughs uncontrollably, pointing out that the boy pulled Sujung from the ground as if he were picking a turnip, proving once and for all that he really does treat other girls in a bizarre way. Sujung, her pride completely wounded and still in shock, curses the short boy for the humiliation of having her lifted by her hood. The scene cuts to the sunny outdoor setting of the school courtyard, far from all the hustle and bustle of the hallways. Walking with Jason on his shoulder, Jinyoung confesses that his plan to stare at Seonwoo's online profile isn't working at all, as he still finds it impossible to get used to her real beauty. Jinyoung's eyes widen and he feels his face burn with embarrassment, still deeply affected by the situation. He keeps looking at Seonwoo's photos on his phone, realizing that her beauty seems to surprise him every time he sees her, and feels that he still has a long way to go before he gets used to it. In his thoughts, Jason points out that they need to discover the real reason behind this anomaly, leaving Jinyoung curious. The boy wonders why, for what mysterious reason, Seonwoo is the only girl in the whole school who doesn't look like a rock to him. While walking down the street, formulating various theories in his mind, Jinyoung suddenly stops upon seeing something strange. He notices Seonwoo standing right there in front of him, looking suspicious, and wonders what she could be doing there. At that same instant, Seonwoo notices the boy's presence and turns his face in his direction. She greets him casually, causing Jinyoung to jump in surprise at the unexpected encounter. The boy murmurs something unintelligible, feeling the nervousness take over his body again. Jinyoung tries to hide his surprise, and Seonwoo asks what he's doing standing there, to which he replies that he doesn't have money to take the bus home. The girl asks where he lives, and Jinyoung replies that he lives in the Simo apartment complex, leaving Seonwoo a little confused. Jinyoung quickly points out that if she also lives in that area, she could easily walk there since it's quite close, but Seonwoo says it's not that simple. With a somewhat awkward smile, she tries to find an excuse not to walk. Seonwoo says he suffers from chronic anemia, which makes Jinyoung even more confused about the situation. Out of compassion, the boy opens his wallet and offers her the little money he has so she can take the bus, but the girl promptly refuses. Seonwoo playfully slaps him on the shoulder, saying he made it look like she was trying to steal from him, and demands that he simply walk her home. Before he can protest, she walks ahead and calls him to follow her, stating that he wouldn't be able to leave her there alone. Jinyoung is in shock, feeling as if a lightning bolt has struck his head at such a sudden invitation. During the walk under the sunset light, Seonwoo doesn't stop talking for a single second, telling stories about school. While the girl chatters happily beside him, Jinyoung walks tensely and silently. Jinyoung is so nervous that he can't pay attention to anything she's saying. Seonwoo notices he's daydreaming and calls his attention, while the boy reflects on how much that walk together surprised him. Jinyoung internally confesses that he feels incredibly uncomfortable with the whole situation. He remembers when he was little and something very similar happened, when he started walking every day with a girl who lived near his house, and naturally ended up developing feelings for her. The problem is that, at that time, other children in the neighborhood started noticing the two of them together and making jokes about them being a couple. Upon hearing the rumors, the little girl panicked and screamed at the top of her lungs that she wasn't dating him. And to little Jinyoung's dismay, the girl even shouted in front of everyone that she would never date someone like him. The trauma of that humiliation was so great that the girl never walked with him again, and Jinyoung never had the chance to reveal his feelings. Returning to the present, Jinyoung sighs, hoping that walk with Seonwoo ends as quickly as possible to prevent history from repeating itself. He tries to console himself by remembering that Seonwoo usually comes home by bus, so that embarrassing situation shouldn't repeat itself the next day. Suddenly, the boy hears a groan of exhaustion and stops walking. To his utter despair, Seonwoo collapses to the ground, completely breathless and weak. Jinyoung runs up to her, asking if she tripped on something or got hurt. Xianwu murmurs that the hill is to blame and reminds Jinyoung of his excuse about chronic anemia, while the boy only now notices the steep path. Unable to stand on her own, she reaches out her hand and asks Jinyoung to help her walk a little, which he readily agrees to. The boy carefully lifts her up, asking her to go slowly, and the girl thanks him for the help. While Xianwu complains of dizziness, Jinyoung has a mental breakdown when he realizes that the two are walking hand in hand. The girl is still panting, her face red from the strenuous walk. Feeling brave, Jinyoung turns around and asks what this story is about her needing so much help. He reminds her of when she witnessed the rough way he pulled her colleague Sukyoung off the ground, questioning why Xianwu expected gentle treatment. The girl bursts into laughter again as she recalls the absurd scene. She mocks the fact that he pulled the girl as if he were picking a turnip, while Jinyoung tries to hide his embarrassment by asking who this Sukyoung is anyway. Uncomfortable, Jinyoung announces that they have finally arrived home and declares that their walk ends there. Xianwu thanks him for the company and bids him a cheerful farewell, while Jinyoung waves back, relieved to have survived the journey. The boy turns his back and sighs, reaffirming how uncomfortable that proximity made him. He thanks heaven that the day is over and trusts that he won't have to go through this again the next day, hoping she has money for the bus. Jinyoung also hopes that she will resolve this anemia problem soon, so that his dangerous imagination will finally stop creating romantic stories. The two continue walking in opposite directions down the quiet street in the neighborhood. Suddenly, Xianwu stops walking and lets out a small murmur as he remembers something. With a mischievous smile, she turns to the boy and says she almost forgot a very important detail. Jinyoung gets such a fright when his name is called that he jumps in the middle of the sidewalk. Turning around, he finds Xianwu with a mischievous look on his face, explaining that it will take a while for him to receive his allowance. Approaching him, she winks and says that tomorrow she will count on his company and protection again, asking him to take care of her once more. The boy simply breathes deeply, breathless from running so much because of all this confusion, while the emotional dizziness takes hold of him again. Now safe in his room, Jinyoung confesses to Jason that he really wants to avoid Xianwu because the whole situation makes him extremely uncomfortable, but his imaginary friend seems curious about one detail. Jason questions the boy about the funny expression he made right after she asked to be accompanied again. Jinyoung realizes his own mistake when he remembers that deep down he liked hearing that and lets out a groan of despair. The memory transports him to the moment when Xianwu's dizziness worsened, and she needed to sit on the floor again, alarming the boy. He asked why she was running in that state, told the girl to sit down, and became furious with her reckless behavior. Back in the room, Jason suggests they revisit their previous line of reasoning and asks why Jinyoung thinks Xianwu is the only girl who doesn't look like a rock. The boy sits cross-legged on the floor, concentrating on the theory of why Jiang Xianwu, who suddenly appeared in his life, would be different from all the other girls in school. After much thought, Jinyoung tells the big guy that he already has the strongest theory to explain everything. He seriously reflects on the situation and arrives at a definitive conclusion. With a hint of sadness in his voice, Jinyoung tries to verbalize the truth he has just discovered. The boy tells Jason that the only logical explanation is that Xianwu is sick, with that chronic anemia she herself mentioned. The next morning, Jinyoung ends the conversation by saying they'll discuss it further later and grabs his backpack to go to school. He opens the bedroom door and goes out into the hallway. Adjusting his backpack and still lost in thought, Jinyoung prepares for another tense school day. In the middle of the room, his father watches the scene in complete silence. Upon noticing his father's presence, Jinyoung greets him quickly and automatically. The father asks if he has already had breakfast, but the boy says he is not hungry and will skip his morning meal. The man mentions that his mother prepared kimchi stew, and Jinyoung promises to eat some later when he returns. The father insists that he eat something before leaving, and Jinyoung simply agrees so as not to prolong the conversation. He announces he's leaving and rushes out the front door as quickly as he can. Outside, Jinyoung's expression changes to one of pure, contained despair. As he walks toward the school, he talks to Jason about the grim consequences of his new theory. If she is indeed very ill, Jinyoung fears he will end up being dragged along and made her his assistant for the rest of the year. Jason tells him not to worry so much before the time comes and to hope the theory is wrong, while the boy continues his walk towards the school gate. Suddenly, as he walked down the school hallway, he heard someone calling his name in a serious tone. Jinyoung comes across the troublemaker Sukyoung standing in the middle of the path, arms crossed and staring intently at him. The girl wastes no time with greetings and bluntly announces that she's going to hit him, taking Jinyoung completely by surprise. He is shocked and asks why she would do such a thing. Sukyoung doesn't care at all and, striking a fighting pose, reveals that she spent the entire night practicing low kicks just to hurt him, while the boy remains confused about who she is. She explains that she had never felt so humiliated in her life as she had the previous day. The memory of the embarrassing moment, when Jinyoung roughly lifted her by the hood of her coat, filled her with rage. Therefore, Sukyoung promises to be nice and only give him 3 painful kicks as punishment, telling him to prepare himself. Jinyoung starts to get annoyed by that madness and asks why he would have to accept being beaten up by that stranger. Before he could even finish his sentence, the girl lunged forward furiously and delivered a powerful kick that struck the boy's legs, eliciting a cry of pain from him. Jinyoung doesn't think twice and runs as fast as he can down the hallway, while the girl questions how he has the audacity to run away from her again. She chases after him determinedly and taunts him, warning him that she's very fast and that, unlike Seonwoo, she doesn't suffer from chronic anemia. Hearing the mention of Seonwoo's health, Jinyoung glances sideways over his shoulder. The long corridor echoes with the heavy footsteps of the girl, relentlessly pursuing him like a raging hurricane. With a grimace of terror, Jinyoung feels as if a giant rock is rolling toward him, ready to crush him. Sukyoung finally catches up with the boy, a victorious smile spreading across her face. She prepares her leg again, positioning her foot for another low kick. Realizing he's about to get hit again, Jinyoung braces himself for the pain and lets out a cry of anticipatory panic. At that exact second, the door to one of the adjacent rooms opens and Seonwoo comes out, complaining about the deafening noise in the hallway. The moment she steps out of the room, Sukyoung's kick, meant for the boy, ends up hitting Seonwoo's leg squarely. Seonwoo screams in complete shock at the painful and unexpected impact on his leg. Sukyoung's eyes widen in disbelief at her own accomplishment, realizing that not only did she miss her target, but that her revenge has just spiraled completely out of control. The impact was so strong that it caused a ligament rupture in Seonwoo's ankle, knocking him to the ground in great pain. Hearing the girl scream and seeing the scene unfold, Jinyoung turns around in utter shock. He runs desperately towards her to help, but in his haste, the boy's foot slips and his flip-flop flies off. With the hallway floor slippery, Jinyoung completely loses his balance and also falls awkwardly, leaving Sukyoung in shock at the double disaster. The impact of Jinyoung's fall is violent, and he hits the ground face first, resulting in a painful broken nose. The scene ends with the two lying bruised and battered in the middle of the hallway, while the one who caused it all just stands there watching, unsure what to do. Sukyoung drops her troublemaker pose and murmurs in confusion, realizing the gravity of the huge mess she just made. Later, after many apologies, the door to the school infirmary closes, muffling the noise from the hallway. Inside, Jinyoung and Seonwoo are lying on stretchers, resting and recovering from the unexpected injuries of that chaotic day. Seonwoo breaks the silence, commenting that Sukyoung has always been a little eccentric, but tries to reassure Jinyoung, saying that he's already feeling much better. Jinyoung, with a huge bandage on his broken nose, thinks to himself that he's ended up alone in the same room as her once again and internally longs for Jason. The imaginary friend is comfortably seated in an armchair drinking tea and tells Jinyoung to cheer and not let his weird side show now. With his heart racing again, the boy realizes Jason's advice is true, as the tension of being alone with her is overwhelming. While the girl remains quiet and thoughtful on the stretcher beside her, Jinyoung silently begs not to utter any stupid phrases again. To lighten the heavy atmosphere, Seonwoo turns his face towards him and asks with a smile if he knows what's for lunch today. With his voice nasalized from the bandage, Jinyoung replies somewhat uncertainly that he thinks the menu for the day is fried yellowtail snapper. The girl reacts excitedly to his response, and noticing the interaction, asks if he had breakfast before coming to school. When the boy admits that he doesn't usually eat in the morning, Seonwoo immediately points out that he must be starving and becomes a little thoughtful. Jinyoung explains that his father is always home in the mornings and that the atmosphere between them isn't the best, so he prefers to leave earlier to avoid contact. Seonwoo smiles and gently suggests that he should try to improve his relationship with his father, and Jinyoung agrees with a light laugh, until he remembers an important detail from the earlier incident. Jinyoung recalls the memory of when he uttered that thoughtless phrase to Seonwoo, calling her very beautiful right after she returned his cell phone. At the time, the boy thought that slip-up was simply a consequence of not having seen a real girl in so long. However, watching her lie calmly on the hospital bed, something changes in the boy's mind and he finally understands the real reason. The truth is that Seonwoo was very beautiful and was clearly playing with his feelings with her teasing and smiles. Startled by his own sudden feelings and the girl's proximity, Jinyoung is unable to contain his inner panic. He quickly apologizes for his earlier strange behavior, while his mind wonders if she had been provoking him all this time on purpose. Amused by the boy's panic, Xianwu laughs and confesses that teasing him is one of the funniest things ever. Jinyang tenses up and asks her to explain what she means by that, but the girl remains mysterious and says that the phrase means exactly what was said. The boy tries to reason, thinking that all she needs to do is give him a little push to start acting like a madman. Embarrassed by the nonsense he said under pressure, Jinyang keeps apologizing, but Xianwu bursts into laughter and tells him to stop. With flushed cheeks and a charming smile, she simply says that she actually finds all of the boy's clumsy antics quite cute. Jinyang falls into absolute silence, frozen in shock at the direct praise, beginning to wonder if the imaginary advisor was right all along. Jason pops into Jinyang's mind, reminding his friend of the theory that this break in the spell could only mean something very serious. The mustachioed man wisely states that the real reason Jinyang's stone armor only failed against Xianwu is quite simple. Jason declares that Jinyang fell in love with Xianwu the exact moment they first crossed paths on the street. The big man reinforces his point of view by taking another sip of tea, saying he sees no other logical explanation for all of this. Back in the infirmary, the sun shines through the window as the two teenagers continue their conversation, oblivious to the wise voice echoing in the boy's head. Later, the schoolyard returns to its usual tranquility. Suddenly, the peace is shattered when Jinyang firmly grabs Sukyung from behind, saying in a threatening tone that now is the time for the real punishment she deserves for her morning kicks. Xianwu joins in the joke, clenching his fists in a fighting stance, and saying it's time for Sukyung to take responsibility for her ankle injury. The pretty girl stares at Sukyung with an almost frightening look and a sadistic smile, announcing the beginning of her revenge. Without mercy, Xianwu delivers a medium kick to Sukyung's stomach, while Jinyang holds her in place to ensure the blow doesn't miss. With the violent impact of Xianwu's kick, Jinyang himself is thrown far away along with Sukyung, feeling the pain of the blow and not understanding why he is being hit as well. While flying through the air, he tries to process what just happened and goes over Jason's theory that it's all about love at first sight. In Jinyang's hazy memories, the image of Xianwu with his back turned makes him wonder if there's really any romance in all of this. The memory fades, and the girl's sweet voice suddenly changes to a mocking whisper, implying that he only fell in love because she was a little bit kind. In his illusion, Xianwu looks at him with superiority and calls him a pathetic loser, completely destroying the boy's romantic fantasy. Jinyang wakes up with a start from his own bed, sweating profusely and breathless after the terrible nightmare. Still dazed, his heart pounding, he realizes he was asleep and murmurs that it was all just a bad dream mixed with his own insecurities. To try and calm down, he looks to the side and sees Jason dressed in pajamas sitting in the bedroom chair, with his imaginary friend pointing out that the boy seems to be out of breath. Jinyang murmurs softly to himself that it was a dream where Xianwu simply despised him. Jason, his imaginary friend, sits beside him on the bed and suggests that his childhood trauma about girls is coming back to haunt him, which the boy admits is very likely. Jinyang confesses that he's actually been having the same bad dream several nights in a row, and Jason asks when this started happening. The boy replies that the nightmares started getting worse since Jason came up with that love-at-first-sight theory about Xianwu. With a knowing smile, Jason points out that if the theory is indeed true, then Jinyang is suffering from unrequited love. The big guy leans in and says firmly that what his friend is feeling now is pure and simple fear of being rejected again. Giving a thumbs up, Jason prepares to give the boy some important advice to help him overcome that block. He quotes an old saying, which states that he who knows the enemy and knows himself can fight 100 battles without any danger. Jinyang reflects on the words and agrees that he really doesn't know much about Xianwu, finding the idea of finding out more about her to be a great strategy. Later at school, Jinyang stops in front of classroom 25, confirming that this is the classroom where Xianwu studies. With his heart pounding, he awkwardly enters the room, while Jason tells him not to tremble so much from nervousness. As soon as he enters, Jinyang looks around the room full of students chatting and girls with stony faces, trying to find his target. He can't see Xianwu anywhere and comments to Jason that she might have gone to the bathroom. At that exact moment, someone calls out from behind him in a deep, intimidating voice, causing Jinyang to freeze in place. The boy turns around and comes face to face with I Am Juman, a burly classmate with a serious expression, who warns him that he is standing right in front of his desk. Jinyang's eyes widened behind his glasses, sensing the intimidating aura and the size of the boy in front of him. Offering hasty apologies, Jinyang steps aside to let Juman pass, and the big guy lets out a grunt before sitting down at the table. Despite the scene, Jason doesn't hide his aversion to the boy and mentally grumbles that something about him makes him want to punch him. Jinyang ignores Jason's provocation and decides to ask Juman if he happens to know where Xianwu is, since that's her table right next to his. Jumin, with a tired expression, murmurs that this always happens and sighs. He subtly hints that kids always end up falling for girls like Xianwu, leaving Jinyoung completely confused. The boy doesn't understand his colleague's superior attitude and wonders why on earth he's speaking in such a presumptuous tone. Unable to tolerate the boy's behavior any longer, Jason imagines himself wielding a huge machine gun and threatens to finish him off right there. But Jinyoung mentally begs his friend to hold back just a little longer. Swallowing his anger, Jinyoung approaches again and asks, a little more firmly, if Jumin really doesn't know where the girl went. Jumin continues with his petulant attitude and replies that there's no way to know the whereabouts of a girl who says such things around town. He calls her a damned girl, which immediately infuriates Jinyoung, who tells him to stop talking badly about Xianwu. Hearing Jinyoung's defense, Jumin mocks him, commenting that the boy seems to be very much in love with her. The provocation is the last straw, and Jinyoung tells the boy to get up from his chair, saying he has something special saved just for him. Jumin gets up grumbling that all of this is too much work, clearly underestimating the situation. Jinyoung's patience completely vanishes and he attacks furiously, using his own uniform jacket as a weapon to strike the cocky boy. The first blow lands squarely and throws Jumin to the side with the force of the impact. Jinyoung doesn't stop and hits his colleague repeatedly with his jacket, eliciting exaggerated screams from him. The barrage of attacks continues, and Jumin wobbles awkwardly with each blow. The bizarre scene is interrupted when Xianwu finally appears in the doorway, surprised and asking who was yelling like that inside. Seeing Jinyoung there, the girl smiles excitedly, but quickly notices the chaotic scene of the two panting boys, with Jinyoung holding his jacket and Jumin's hair all disheveled. Jinyoung quickly explains, shouting that her classmate had called her a damned girl, and that he was only teaching the boy a lesson for her sake. Xianwu doesn't care about the insult, tells him not to worry, and laughing reveals that Jumin is always like that. Jinyoung is completely confused and turns to Jumin, who starts laughing, asking what his problem is. With a smile on his face, Xianwu explains the whole situation, revealing that the boy has been acting strangely since they were little kids, leaving Jinyoung perplexed. Jumin joins the conversation, confirming that the two are great childhood friends, and Jinyoung lets out a surprised exclamation. Later, Jinyoung and Jumin are talking outside the school under a blue sky. Sitting on a bench in the courtyard, Jinyoung apologizes for the beating with his jacket and Jumin accepts, saying the blows didn't really hurt. Still curious about their relationship, Jinyoung asks how long they've been friends, and the big guy replies that they've known each other since they were 3 years old. The boy perks up and smiles, realizing that this is the perfect opportunity to put Jason's strategy into practice and learn more about Xianwu's life. However, Jumin cuts him off and warns him with a serious expression that if he's interested in Xianwu, he'd better give up right now. He explains that Xianwu is ridiculously popular throughout the entire school, and that there's practically an army of boys chasing after her all the time. Jumin also reveals that despite so many interested parties, the success rate of anyone trying to get close to her is 0. Jinyoung listens to the explanation calmly and admits that he had already imagined something like that, remembering that the girl has more than 2,000 followers on Instagram. He argues that all these rejections don't mean she's unattainable, only that none of the boys were her type since everyone has their own preferences, and Jumin agrees that this is possible. But Jumin remains serious and clarifies that it wasn't because of competition or personal preference that he recommended Jinyoung give up on the girl. The scene cuts to the past, when Jinyoung and Xianwu were still just little kids in kindergarten. From a young age, the two always ended up studying at the same schools, fighting over toys, and spending a lot of time together. Until one day, during high school, Jinyoung heard a girl calling someone's attention in the hallway. The memory fades and returns to Jumin, who continues telling his version of the story to Jinyoung, recalling the day he tried to extort lunch from a weaker classmate. At that moment, Jumin was interrupted and got a huge fright. Xianwu called him by name and reprimanded him, and it was from that exact moment that Jumin says she began to feel that there was something very strange about her. He explains that she was smiling with her usual sweet smile, but her gaze hid something different and frightening that he didn't know how to explain. Jumin confesses to Jinyoung that the strange feeling that something is wrong with Xianwu still haunts him to this day and has never truly gone away. And because of this frightening premonition, the boy concludes his story by advising Jinyoung to give up on the girl before it's too late. Jinyoung is incredulous at the big guy's story and wonders what he means by the girl having something strange about her. Lost in thought, he recalls the time he bumped into Xianwu near the lockers and didn't sense any threatening or dangerous aura emanating from her. He concludes that all of this is probably just the big guy exaggerating a baseless personal opinion. Jinyang suddenly freezes in the middle of the hallway when Jumin lets out a surprised exclamation, pointing ahead. The two come across Sionwoo and Sukyoung walking hand in hand, and Jinyang is confused about how the two became such good friends so quickly. Jumin immediately notices Sionwoo and asks where she had sneaked off to earlier, while Jinyang panics and decides to make up an excuse to keep the girl from finding out they were gossiping about her. However, before he can say anything, Jumin simply spills the beans, shamelessly revealing that the two of them were talking badly about her behind her back. The sudden betrayal makes Jinyang almost explode with rage and wonder if that big guy's brain is working properly. The two friends stop in the middle of the hallway and turn around to understand what the boys are saying. Sionwoo asks if they were really talking about her, and Jinyang starts sweating and stuttering, desperately trying to deny everything. Sukyoung doesn't miss the opportunity, laughing at Jinyang's face and pointing out how his true loser nature was finally being revealed, while the boy continues to defend himself. Jumin interrupts the discussion, further provoking Jinyang by stating that he spoke very badly of her and ruined her reputation. Having no patience for any more nonsense, Jinyang lunges at Jumin and uses his jacket again to shut him up with a beating. The first attack lands squarely and sends the big guy staggering to the side. The impact of the jacket reverberates down the hallway as Jumin tries to regain his balance after the blow. Jason celebrates the perfect shot with a machine gun in hand, praising his friend and saying that he almost shot the cocky kid himself. Sionwoo and Sukyoung simply watch Jinyang chase Jumin and hit him again, finding the whole mess very pathetic. But before Jinyang can hear Sionwoo's comment about ignoring those idiots, the girl turns around and starts to walk away. The bell rings to signal the end of classes, and the school gates finally open for the students to leave. Alone, Jinyang walks home worried that he hadn't managed to find anything useful, and had even come across as the guy who talks badly about her. Jason, leaning on his shoulder, agrees that the plan completely failed because of Jumin's ridiculous interruptions. Jinyang continues to mentally curse the big guy, finding it completely absurd that he said Sionwoo was dangerous, and concludes that he should have beaten the envious boy even harder. Jinyang's irritation is interrupted when a familiar voice calls his name from the street. Turning around, he comes face to face with Sionwoo, who is smiling provocatively and ironically asking if he had a lot of fun talking badly about her with Jumin. Jinyang jumps in fright, trembling all over at her sudden presence right after he had been thinking about the matter. His cheeks flushed with nervousness, he grumbles about Sionwoo's awful habit of sneaking up to scare him. The girl simply bursts into laughter and is once again amused by the boy's funny reaction when he's startled. Jinyang begs her to stop showing up out of nowhere and tries to explain himself again, assuring her that he wasn't gossiping about her, and Sionwoo agrees, nodding that he knows the truth. She doesn't lose her smile and gives Jinyang a friendly pat on the back, reassuring him and saying she's sure Jumin was just being inconvenient as always. Leaving the subject aside, Sionwoo leans on him and asks Jinyang to walk her home, which makes the boy question if she doesn't have money for the bus again today, which the girl immediately denies. Sionwoo explains with a disheartened expression that just thinking about climbing that hill in the village is exhausting her. Jinyang becomes tense and thoughtful about the situation, while Jason agrees that the closeness could be a problem, remembering that Jinyang didn't speak ill of Sionwoo but was indeed probing his friend about her. The boy whispers back to Jason, agreeing that the best strategy at the moment is to keep this a secret. He turns his face away and lets out a long sigh of frustration. Sionwoo doesn't notice the boy's drama and crosses his arms, complaining again about how much he hates the hills in the neighborhood. Jinyang asks her if walking on a steep path is really that difficult for her, and Sionwoo quickly replies that it's the worst thing in the world. Smiling and raising her finger, she goes on to list all the symptoms of her chronic anemia, detailing how the hill causes her intense headaches, dizziness, and shortness of breath, to which Jinyang replies compassionately that she must suffer a lot. To solve the problem, she turns her back to him and points with her thumb, saying that she wants Jinyang to push her uphill. Jinyang hesitates, completely embarrassed, asking if this is really necessary, but Sionwoo smiles excitedly and tells him to hurry up if he wants to go home soon. With no way out, Jinyang swallows hard, carefully raises his trembling hands, and gently rests them on Sionwoo's back to begin pushing. And so they begin to climb the long hill in the neighborhood, with the boy slowly pushing the girl and asking if that was helping in any way, to which Sionwoo excitedly assures him that it was. While Jinyang pushes her, Sionwoo lets out a little laugh and complains playfully that it's tickling him a bit. She explains that her back is extremely sensitive to touch, making the young man even more embarrassed by the contact. Jinyang feels his face burning with embarrassment and thinks about how much that girl disconcerted him with jokes of that kind. The boy tries to control his racing heartbeat, but his fertile imagination immediately begins to wander. He finds himself thinking about what it would be like if they were closer and could act more naturally with each other, while Xianwu asks him to push a little slower. Jinyang is so lost in his own thoughts that he imagines himself carrying the girl piggyback uphill, promising to take care of her with complete devotion. Your imaginary Cupid, Jason, appears clapping enthusiastically at all the sugary romance. The young man tries to justify himself, laughing nervously and assuring everyone that daydreaming like that is perfectly normal. After all, he wasn't planning names for his future grandchildren yet. Jason agrees that he is free to dream whatever he wants, until Xianwu calls the boy by a pet name and brings him back to reality. The girl screamed, complaining that he was pushing too fast and that she was about to actually faint, leaving Jinyang panicked. Terrified, the boy begins to apologize desperately, confessing that he was distracted for a brief second. After the scare passes, Jinyang looks around and realizes that they have finally reached the top of the hill. They admire the beautiful view of the city at sunset, and the young man admits that the view from up there is truly impressive. He comments on how nice it is to be in such an open and airy place, finally getting to know the region where Xianwu lives. At that moment, Xianwu lets out an exclamation of surprise as he looks towards the horizon. She confesses that she also had no idea that such a beautiful viewpoint existed so close to her own house, surprising Jinyang as it was her first time there too. The girl jokes that in the end, that steep hill is definitely not the kind of place someone with chronic anemia should be climbing. Pouting, she pretends to be angry and complains that she's now exhausted and still has to walk all the way back, making Jinyang apologize once again. The boy remains silent for a moment, but Xianwu quickly changes his attitude. She smiles tenderly and says that, just because he introduced her to such a wonderful place, she'll forgive his mistake this time. Jinyang watches her silently under the reddish light of dusk. Xianwu tucks his hair behind his ear and smiles sweetly at the scenery, repeatedly expressing how beautiful it all is. Looking at her profile, Jinyang's heart beats even faster and he decides to take a courageous step. He remembers Juman's warnings about Xianwu having something strange about him and confesses to himself that he still doesn't quite understand what his friend meant. But if focusing his attention entirely on her and not being able to see anything else around him is what his friend called strange, then Jinyang accepts that he is completely lost in love with her. He takes a breath and decides to be completely honest once and for all. The boy calls her by name in a serious tone, making Xianwu turn curiously in his direction. Jinyang immediately confesses that he was indeed talking about her with Juman earlier in the courtyard. The girl is surprised and asks if he was really talking badly about her behind her back, which the boy vehemently denies. He explains that he just wanted to understand how she and Juman had become so close since childhood. His face flushed with shyness, Jinyang confesses that the real reason for the conversation was that he simply wanted to learn more about her. The unexpected revelation catches Xianwu by surprise, leaving her speechless and slightly blushing. Jinyang continues explaining himself, saying that in the end it seemed like gossip, but swears up and down that he would never speak ill of her to anyone. Scratching his head in embarrassment, he confesses that he absolutely didn't want her to have any misunderstanding about him. Xianwu observes him in complete silence for a few moments, making the boy even more tense. To his relief, she breaks into a radiant smile and tells him not to worry about such nonsense, as she had already forgotten what had happened. Jinyang can hardly believe such generosity, and Xianwu invites him to begin the descent back home. The boy asks worriedly if she'll be all right on the way down, and the girl replies confidently that she won't have any problems. As they approached his house, Xianwu thanked him for the company and the ride uphill before bidding farewell with a cheerful wave. Jinyang stood still in the middle of the street, feeling his chest burst with happiness and his heart pounding at that farewell. Jason appears with his arms crossed, commenting that Xianwu's reaction was quite difficult to decipher, startling the boy. The imaginary friend questions whether Jinyang really needed to be so honest about wanting to get to know her better, leaving the boy doubting his own behavior. Jason reflects that honesty is good, but sometimes it's much better to remain silent and let things resolve themselves. As he walks back, Jinyang wonders what the girl really felt about that declaration, unaware that Xianwu is continuing on her way home, lost in thought. The girl walks silently through the neighborhood streets with a serene expression and a slight blush on her cheeks. She can't stop replaying the sweet words Jinyang said about wanting to know more about her. With a silly grin on her face, Xianwu thinks about how Jinyang has this adorable habit of disarming her, with such sincere declarations out of the blue. The girl continues towards her final destination, her thoughts entirely focused on the boy. But the romantic stroll is short-lived, and soon Xianwu dramatically collapses onto the sidewalk, complaining that he's completely out of breath again. The following day, the sun shines brightly once more on the main school building, marking the start of another school day. Suddenly, Jason lets out an exclamation of surprise upon seeing the boy preparing to leave. The imaginary friend notices that he is wearing a tracksuit and comments that it's been a long time since Jinyoung last played soccer. Jason supports the initiative, saying it's great that he's exercising and working up a sweat to become even stronger and healthier. As he walks down the hallway focused on the match, Jinyoung looks down and notices a slight discomfort. He notices that his shoelace came undone halfway there. Without thinking much, the boy simply crouches down right there in the middle of the hallway to adjust his shoe. Suddenly, a female authoritative voice echoes from above him, startling the young man. Standing there is Professor Hanjeol, who stares at him with her arms crossed and sternly asks who gave him permission to crouch right in the middle of the passageway. The teacher complains that she almost tripped and fell because of him, questioning in a scolding tone whether the boy has lost his zest for life. Still startled by the sudden scolding, Jinyoung looks up and stammers as he greets her. But before he can explain himself, Professor Hanjeol places her hand on his head and pushes it down, ordering him not to look at her. Confused and with his head down, Jinyoung questions the reason for such a strange order. The teacher replies immediately that he looks very unattractive when viewed from below, explaining that women hate that angle. She concludes by saying that the whole situation is very embarrassing and playfully calls him lazy. As she walks away down the hallway, she leaves a warning for him never to stop suddenly in the middle of the road again. Jinyoung remains on the floor watching the teacher leave, still processing that peculiar interaction. Deep down, he doesn't really care much about the scolding, since to him Professor Hanjeol was nothing more than another gray stone statue, although Jason reminds him that if he answered back he'd be in trouble. All of Jinyoung's coldness actually stems from a fear of rejection, which in the past caused him to create this barrier of seeing all girls as rocks. And to ensure that he would never again experience romantic humiliation, he decided to focus all his energy on himself. The young man spent years dedicating himself intensely to his studies and training at the academy alongside his loyal advisor, Jason. As a result of all that effort and physical preparation, Jinyoung now runs across the soccer field and delivers an extremely powerful kick to the ball. The ball flies with absurd speed straight into the back of the net, giving goalkeeper Jiumin no chance to make a save. The classmates rush to celebrate the decisive goal, rejoicing in the victory and praising Jinyoung's incredible skill. The team celebrates excitedly, planning to crush the other team in the next game, while Jiumin remains in goal, completely exhausted and frustrated. Nearby, Seonwoo and his friend Sujung walk along the side of the field and notice the boys' movements. Sujung points out that they are playing soccer, and Seonwoo immediately complains that the classroom will smell unbearably of sweat afterward. The friend takes a closer look and comments that Jinyoung is also in the middle of the game, drawing Seonwoo's attention. Suddenly, a group of girls in the stands burst into enthusiastic cheers for the boy. They comment on how charming he looks playing soccer and how he stands out from the others, attracting the curious glances of Seonwoo and Sujung. Seonwoo watches the boy run across the field, paying close attention to his agility. The other girls continue to compliment his athletic physique, finding it charming that he is so reserved and shows no interest whatsoever in girls. Hearing the compliments about him being nice and attractive, Seonwoo just murmurs thoughtfully, while Sujung thinks all that flattery from the girls is a tremendous exaggeration. Sujung questions why Jinyoung is so successful, suggesting that finding the boy attractive would be stretching it too far. Seonwoo silently sucks on his lollipop, staring intently at the field. Her mind drifted back to all the times she'd seen Jinyoung stutter, tremble with nervousness, and act completely awkward around her. Amused by these sweet memories, she smiles slightly and admits to her friend that, thinking about it that way, she can even understand Jinyoung's charm. Shortly after, the bell rings announcing the end of activities, and the students begin to pack their things to leave. The boys on the team continue celebrating and thank Jinyoung for the victory, agreeing to play again the next day. Jinyoung says goodbye to his friends and decides to go to the outdoor water fountain to wash his face and remove excess sweat before going inside. He turns on the tap and lets the cold water run freely. The boy splashes water on his face to cool off from the exhaustion of the tough game. As he dusts himself off, a serious voice echoes behind him, praising the beautiful goal he scored in the match. The person standing there is Jiumin, who admits with surprise that he had never seen anyone manage to score such a difficult goal against him. Jinyoung thanks him for the compliment and returns the favor, saying that Jiumin also did very well as goalkeeper today. The big guy's expression changes, and he says bitterly that he feels extremely wronged by the outcome. He asks if Jinyoung knows the dark side of football, but the boy bluntly says he has absolutely no interest in knowing. Ignoring his teammates' coldness, Jumin explains that the worst part is that, when the team loses, the blame always ends up falling entirely on the goalkeeper's shoulders. He complains that he can save 10 difficult shots, but if he lets in a single goal, he's crucified by everyone, concluding that this is exactly why he dislikes Jinyoung. With his gaze fixed on the boy, he reiterates that his resentment stems from not having been able to defend that kick, leaving Jinyoung speechless at such childishness. Seeing the boy's slackness, Jason appears furious with an axe in hand, ready to finish him off, while Jinyoung desperately tries to calm his imaginary friend in his thoughts. While washing his face at the outdoor water fountain, Jinyoung fills his hand with cold water, a rather mischievous idea in mind. With a sarcastic smile, he throws the water right in Jumin's face, saying he has a special little present for him. Jumin gets a huge fright from the sudden shower and complains about the extremely cold water. The big guy doesn't take it lying down and throws water back, starting a real water jet war in the schoolyard. The childish fight continues with the two getting soaked and calling each other weirdos and four eyes. Not far from there, Seonwoo and his friend Sujung were walking distractedly until they heard the boys' exaggerated shouts coming from the water fountain area. Sujung points out that Jinyoung and the big guy are yelling like crazy for some reason and asks if her friend can hear what's going on. Curious, the two decide to walk over there to find out what kind of nonsense the boys are up to this time. As the girls approach, the water fight finally ceases, leaving Jinyoung and Jumin completely soaked and breathless. Jinyoung angrily complains that he feels awful, and his clothes are soaked because of his classmates' childish behavior. Jumin simply takes off his own wet shirt to wring out the water, acting as if it were nothing, leaving Jinyoung even more upset. Determined not to get his clothes soaked, Jinyoung also takes off his shirt to dry it, vowing that he'll settle the score with the big guy after class. Right at that moment, Seonwoo and Sujung appear and kindly ask if the two aren't going inside, since the bell for classes has already rung. Upon noticing the girls' sudden presence, Jinyoung is completely shocked to find himself shirtless in front of them. Seonwoo and Sujung stare intently at the boy, visibly impressed by his physique. The two blushed slightly at the unexpected and surprising sight of Jinyoung's athletic physique. Jumin also turns around shirtless, hoping to receive the same kind of positive reaction from the girls. However, upon seeing the big guy's awkward physique, the two girls immediately frowned with expressions of deep disappointment and disgust. Sujung angrily complains that she should never have accepted the invitation to go there, while Seonwoo fully agrees that the scene of Jumin shirtless is a real nightmare. Offended by the girls' blatant rejection, Jumin rages furiously, while Jinyoung remains cowering in embarrassment right behind him. The boy becomes completely desperate when he realizes that Seonwoo ended up seeing him practically half-naked in the middle of the school. Blaming Jumin for all that public humiliation, Jinyoung steps forward and applies a rear-naked choke to his teammate, venting all his frustration through physical force. The next day, the sun shines brightly again over the schoolyard for the start of a new sporting event. Still focused on the soccer game, Jinyoung unleashes another powerful shot towards the opponent's goal. This time, Jumin stretches out completely and manages to make a miraculous save, firmly holding the ball in his arms. The saved shot leaves Jinyoung completely perplexed and incredulous at the goalkeeper's reflexes. The stands erupt in celebration of Jumin's incredible save, who sports a proud and victorious smile. The goalkeeper takes the opportunity to confront Jinyoung provocatively, mocking his teammates' performance. Jumin mocks him, saying his kicks today sound like a crybaby's, infuriating Jinyoung for playing so poorly. Jason points out in his thoughts that his physical performance is terrible today, and Jinyoung admits that the emotional tension is destroying his focus on the game. Taking advantage of the end of the first half of the match, Jinyoung decides to go to the stands to rest a bit and try to clear his mind. He sits down step by step on the school's concrete bleachers, trying to catch his breath. Sighing with weariness, the boy remains alone and pensive in the shade of the courtyard structure. Suddenly, a sweet voice resonates just above his head, gently commenting that he seems very tired. Looking up, Jinyoung sees Seonwoo standing on the top steps, looking at him with a friendly smile. The boy is terribly startled and tries to stammer her name, completely disconcerted by her sudden approach. But true despair takes hold of Jinyoung when he realizes the position they are in at the moment. The boy starts yelling desperately for her to come down immediately, leaving Seonwoo confused and not understanding the reason for so much panic. Covering his cheeks, flushed with embarrassment, Jinyoung realizes that Professor Hanjeol was absolutely right about the dangers of that angle. He finally understands why all the girls used to seem like gray stone statues to him, but seeing Seonwoo from underneath was something completely different. The boy shrinks back in embarrassment as he realizes how awkward and unsettling that low-angle view is. Xianwu questions what kind of strange reaction that is and asks if he doesn't want to look at her face, to which Jinyong quickly denies. He tries to justify himself by explaining that Professor Hanjiol once commented that people look ugly when viewed from below, and that girls hate being looked at that way. With an amused smile, Xianwu points to herself and asks if he really thinks she's ugly like that, making Jinyong scream in absolute denial. Without thinking, he ends up confessing that, in fact, she looks even more beautiful from that angle, leaving Xianwu surprised and speechless as he sits down next to him. Jinyong immediately turned his face away, feeling regret and shame consume every inch of his body. Xianwu rests his chin on his hand and watches him out of the corner of his eye with a mysterious and provocative smile on his lips. The boy curses himself internally in despair, unable to believe the utter romantic nonsense he just blurted out of nowhere. Jason resurfaces in his mind to mock his friend, pointing out that he fell right into the girl's trap and gave himself completely away once again. The imaginary friend mocks the even more beautiful statement, leaving Jinyong desperate and wondering what he should do now to fix the situation. Faced with Jinyong's despair, his imaginary friend Jason simply abandons him to his own fate, telling him to fend for himself. Holding his head in his hands, the boy deeply regrets his big mouth, knowing that trying to fix what he said would only make the situation even more bizarre and embarrassing. While he torments himself, Xianwu remains silent beside him, resting his chin on his hand with a very focused look and flushed cheeks. She continues to gaze at the boy tenderly, making Jinyong even more tense with that prolonged silence. To his surprise, the girl finally breaks the ice and sweetly thanks him for the spontaneous compliment she just received. She playfully asks if he said that just to make her feel better, leaving Jinyong relieved to realize she decided to let the matter go lightly. Xianwu happily comments that compliments are always wonderful to hear, and the boy shyly nods in agreement. She then teases the boy back, saying that she always hears the other girls at school praising Jinyong and saying how attractive and cool he is. The boy immediately panics and denies everything, gesturing wildly with his hands, insisting that he has absolutely nothing attractive or cool about him. Xianwu smiles slightly and insists playfully, stating that deep down she doesn't think the other girls are wrong about him. Very surprised by the statement, Jinyong stammers as he asks in what sense she thinks the girls are right. With a mysterious smile on her lips, the girl prepares to give the definitive answer. At that moment, Jinyong's mind travels back to the embarrassing incident where he was shirtless at the outdoor water fountain in front of her. The girl leans slowly toward him, dangerously shortening the distance between the two steps. She leans very close to his ear and whispers provocatively that he is attractive in absolutely every way. The whispered revelation hits Jinyong like an electric shock, making the boy blush intensely with embarrassment. Xianwu watches him closely with a sweet and triumphant look, perfectly aware of the effect he has on the boy. Luckily for Jinyong, a classmate appears running down the sideline and shouts, announcing that the second half of the soccer match is about to begin. The boy jumps up to return to the field, feeling saved by the bell from that intense situation with Xianwu. The pretty girl remains seated on the bleacher steps, waving excitedly and shouting for him to score a goal and do his best in the match. Back on the field, Xianwu's cheers completely transform Jinyong's energy, who now faces his opponents with an extremely focused and determined gaze. As he runs across the field, he mentally converses with Jason, confessing that he doesn't quite understand what has changed in his body. Jinyong recalls that he was playing terribly and without any motivation throughout the entire first half of the match. But now, upon receiving the pass from his teammates, the boy feels light and runs with impressive agility towards the opponent's goal. From his imaginary shoulder, Jason observes his friend's sudden change in attitude with a very satisfied look and wonders if he really doesn't know the reason for it. The big guy smirks and says that Jinyong already knows very well what the answer is to all this energy. And the truth is, the boy is risking his life on that field simply because he knows Xianwu is in the stands watching his every move. In an almost solemn tone, Jason confesses that he feels a little awkward saying this, since it contradicts the advice to remain cold that he gave his friend in the past. But the imaginary friend gives in and admits that perhaps things need to change course from now on. Jinyong kicks the ball with all his might and scores a spectacular goal, bulging the opponent's net without giving the goalkeeper a chance. Jason watches the celebration and concludes that the boy's silly romantic fantasies might not be so bad after all. His teammates rush to embrace him, celebrating the well-deserved victory and praising the wonderful shot that secured the win. Feeling the weight of his nervousness completely disappear, Jinyong finally breaks into a radiant smile and truly celebrates with his friends. Meanwhile, in the back of the field, Jumin rages angrily at his own mistake, vowing that he will never forgive Jinyong for scoring that own goal against him. Sianwoo watches the boys' celebration with an extremely sweet smile and blushing cheeks, very proud of his performance. Under the golden late afternoon sky, the school celebrates Jinyoung's team's victory amidst the students' jubilation. Professor Hanjeol walks past the bleachers and notices the two young people talking from afar, thinking to herself that the girl is really lucky to have Jinyoung so smitten with her. The sun finally begins to set behind the residential buildings, bringing an end to another tiring school day. Upon arriving home after class, Jinyoung opens the door and silently enters the hallway of his residence. But the silence is soon broken when he hears a heated argument coming directly from the kitchen. At the dinner table, her parents are arguing about a last-minute canceled trip due to her father's exhausting work schedule, leaving her mother deeply upset. The mother laments the wasted tickets they had bought, but interrupts her complaint as soon as she notices Jinyoung entering the room. The boy greets his mother shyly, and she immediately asks if he has eaten anything since he got home from school. Jinyoung tries to disguise his intentions by saying he's just going to grab a quick snack later, but his mother gently reprimands him, reminding him that it's no substitute for a real meal. The boy remains silent, unwilling to admit that he is actually starving because he skipped breakfast. He watches his father eating silently at the dinner table, thinking about how the atmosphere of sharing meals with him still feels extremely heavy and uncomfortable for him. Jason appears elegantly dressed, savoring a beautiful imaginary banquet, reminding the boy that he needs to eat properly regardless of family problems. To change the subject, Jinyoung's mother shows him 2 tickets she received from a neighbor and asks if the boy wouldn't like to take advantage of the weekend to go out. She explains that they are tickets to a very famous play and suggests that he invite a classmate to go with him on Saturday. The mother confesses, disheartened, that she had planned to go with his father, but that last-minute work ruined the couple's plans, eliciting an uncomfortable cough from the man at the table. Jinyoung examines the tickets thoughtfully, processing that he now has 2 tickets to a play in his hands. He starts to blush and wonders who would be the best option to accompany him on the weekend. The boy immediately imagines himself inviting a friendly classmate, but in his mind he quickly makes up an excuse, saying he's going to feel unwell that very day. He then envisions a scene where he invites a muscular friend from the sports club, but the guy also declines, saying he has important club activities to attend to. Even the hulking Juman pops into his thoughts, dismissing the invitation and stating disdainfully that theater is definitely not his style. Jinyoung lets out a tired sigh, overwhelmed by all the imagined rejection in his head. Trying his luck in reality, Jinyoung comments to Juman that he already imagined he would prefer anime to theater plays, but the big guy is surprised by the comment. The colleague retorted irritably, asking what he was talking about, assuring him that he doesn't watch any kind of anime. Leaving Jinyoung completely confused, Juman simply turns his back and says he's going to the cafeteria to buy a snack. Alone, Jinyoung wonders why his mind automatically associated Juman with the stereotype of an anime fan. Jason reappears, agreeing that prejudices and silly stereotypes can actually be dangerous, frightening the boy. The imaginary friend points out that all the boys on his list refuse the invitation and asks what the plan is now, while Professor Hanjeol sneaks closer. Jinyoung tries to disguise his frustration with a nervous laugh, unsure who to invite under Jason's watchful gaze. The muscular Jason stares at him seriously and demands that he be completely honest with himself once and for all. He throws it in his friend's face that in reality, the only person Jinyoung truly wants to invite to that theater is Sianwoo. Jason recalls that he used to live under the control of fear, but now he can't get the pretty girl out of his head, while Jinyoung desperately tries to deny it to the teacher. At that point, Professor Hanjeol joins the conversation, stating that it's high time he made an important decision, leaving the young man confused. She calls him by his full name in a firm and authoritative tone. The teacher crosses her arms and demands a formal bow from the boy. Startled, Jinyoung bows and apologizes, saying he hadn't seen her there, but Hanjeol retorts sarcastically, saying he already suspected as much since Jinyoung was walking around talking to himself. She asks skeptically if he happens to have the strange habit of creating imaginary friends and chatting with them. The question hits Jinyoung like a bucket of cold water, leaving the boy in total panic, wondering how she could possibly know his secret. Shortly after, the two sit down on a patio bench to talk more privately. The teacher gets straight to the point and says she knows there's a girl he really wants to invite to see that play, and Jinyoung ends up admitting it's true. Hanjeol comments that Sianwoo is extremely popular, making the boy's eyes widen and wonder how the teacher guessed her name. Jinyoung asks in complete shock how she found out that his interest was precisely in the pretty girl. With a mischievous smile, the teacher reveals that she overheard their entire whispered conversation the previous day, including the part where he called her even more beautiful, making Jinyoung scream in embarrassment. She quickly shifts to a more serious tone to continue giving advice. The teacher points out that Jinyoung is acting that cowardly way simply because he has an absurd fear of being rejected by the girl. The boy lowers his head and admits, embarrassed, that the fear of being rejected really haunts him. Hanjol explains that asking a girl of Seonwoo's caliber out in front of everyone is, in practice, the same as asking her out on a romantic date. For her, such a direct invitation is equivalent to a true declaration of love, leaving the young man thoughtful. Even understanding his fears, the teacher stands up, calling him a cowardly brat, and walks away, leaving Jinyoung confused by her reaction. She assures him that in the future the boy will thank her for this, leaving a question mark in his mind. To Jinyoung's utter despair, teacher Hanjol spots Seonwoo and Sujung walking nearby and calls out to the pretty girl loudly. She informs Seonwoo that Jinyoung has something very important to say and tells the girl to go listen, leaving the boy in a complete state of shock and panic. Seonwoo and Sujung approach, intrigued by the summons, while Jinyoung internally curses himself, not understanding why the teacher decided to do such a crazy thing. Without the slightest ceremony, the teacher reveals to Seonwoo that Jinyoung really wants to invite her to see a play on the weekend, making the boy want to disappear in embarrassment. Sujung can't contain herself and bursts into laughter, calling Jinyoung a coward for using the teacher to extend the invitation, while Seonwoo begs her friend not to be so mean. The teacher bids Seonwoo farewell, telling him to go talk to the boy right away, and she accepts the advice in a good-humored way. Seonwoo walks towards him waving happily, while Jinyoung falls into deep despair, mentally begging that it's all a nightmare. He remembers Hanjol's warning that the invitation was tantamount to a romantic declaration, when Seonwoo approaches asking about the weekend's play. With a radiant smile and flushed cheeks, the girl sweetly asks if he wouldn't like to go with her. Jinyoung is completely paralyzed and breathless in the face of such a direct and unexpected attack. The boy tries to formulate any words of reply, but his mind completely shuts down. In the end, he simply accepts the invitation with a shy whisper, sealing what in practice became a true mutual declaration. On the Saturday of the meeting, Jinyoung arrives early at the agreed-upon location and anxiously awaits her arrival, under Jason's watchful eye. The imaginary friend celebrates ironically, pointing out that, against all odds, Jinyoung actually managed to arrange a weekend date with Seonwoo. Jason lectures the boy for accepting everything impulsively without thinking, while Jinyoung admits that his friend is right about the danger of going with the flow. Trying to calm his nerves, Jinyoung adjusts his clothes and asks if he looks good, receiving a sincere compliment from Jason that he looks very attractive, although the boy confesses that the new contact lenses are bothering him quite a bit. Jinyoung is surprised and tries to argue, but his friend quickly cuts him off, saying that's not the really important part of everything that's happening. With his arms crossed and a firm posture, Jason directly questions what kind of relationship the boy wants to have with Seonwoo. Jinyoung stares silently at his imaginary friend, while the big guy insists he needs to make a final decision about it right now. The boy's eyes widen when Jason states that it's quite obvious he has genuine romantic feelings for her. Jason continues his reasoning, pointing out that, with that clumsy invitation to go to the theater, the girl has most likely already noticed his interest in some way. Even knowing that for most people this wouldn't be a big deal, the big guy remembers that Jinyoung carries a gigantic and paralyzing fear of being rejected. If the boy simply throws himself headlong into this situation without thinking, Jason warns that the terrible nightmare of being rejected that he saw in his dream could end up becoming a reality. On the other hand, the counselor explains that if the young man can let go of his feelings for her now, he will be able to avoid the pain he fears most in the world. The big problem is that Jinyoung feels completely powerless, without the slightest idea of how to simply erase feelings that are already very much alive inside his chest. But then an idea pops into his head as he remembers that he's done exactly this before and knows very well how the process works. That solution would be to apply her old mental defense of shutting down her feelings, and start seeing Seonwoo literally as if she were just another gray rock. Jason smiles from behind his imposing mustache and calls the boy his friend, preparing to give his final word on this path. Jinyoung is confused when the big guy warns him that, if his choice is indeed to turn her to stone to escape rejection, he will give her the appropriate advice for that decision. However, if his intention is to overcome the traumas of the past once and for all, the young man will need to face reality as he watches the beautiful Seonwoo approach, all dressed up on the pedestrian crossing. Looking at her so radiant on that sunny day, the boy felt his face flush with both embarrassment and admiration. Jason watches him and promises that, as his longtime friend, he will do absolutely everything in his power to help him overcome this challenge. With his heart in his throat, Jinyoung focuses his attention on Seonwoo's welcoming smile as she walks towards him. Standing face to face on the sidewalk in the daylight, the boy realizes that the definitive moment has arrived to make his decision and choose which path to follow. Ultimately, being rejected by someone is one of those painful experiences that almost everyone ends up facing at some point in their lives. For Jinyoung, the memory of being cruelly discarded as a child still deeply wounds his pride. It was precisely because of this trauma that little Jason's advice to visualize all girls as gray stones worked so surgically for him. The young man knows that when a man and a woman spend a lot of time together, it's natural for feelings to begin to emerge and for the desire to get closer to grow stronger. But by mentally turning all the girls around him into stone statues, Jinyoung managed to banish any impulse of intimacy from his mind before it even began to develop. He knows very well that rejection is a part of everyone's life, but deep down he still feels completely terrified by the possibility. The painful memory of feeling abandoned and rejected since childhood is the true driving force behind the wall he has built around himself. Trying to put their worries aside, the two teenagers enter a beautiful coffee shop with large glass windows to wait for the time of their trip. Seonwoo rests his face on his hand with a charming smile and teases the boy, saying that he looks very sophisticated and grown-up drinking a cup of espresso. Jinyoung feels a little embarrassed and stammers a response, unable to admit that he only chose that bitter drink because it was the cheapest option on the entire menu. The girl happily comments that they still have about an hour before the show starts and confesses that she's very anxious, since it's her first time seeing a play. The boy lets out a nervous laugh as he takes a sip of his coffee, his thoughts still entirely focused on the serious warning Jason gave him earlier. He keeps dwelling on the idea that if he can suppress his feelings and start seeing Seonwoo as a rock, he'll never have to relive the pain of that terrible nightmare of rejection. On the other hand, making the decision to face reality and truly engage with it means he will have to confront all his childhood traumas head-on. Alone with his doubts, Jinyoung shrinks in his chair, clutching his warm cup, and wonders if someone like him would really be able to do this. After all, he spent entire years relying solely on that same survival tactic of turning every girl in school into blocks of concrete in his mind. Seonwoo notices his distraction and curiously asks what's going on in the boy's head, startling him back to reality. Trying to hide his nervousness by any means, he makes up the excuse that the espresso tasted so awful and bitter that he ended up feeling a bit dizzy. The pretty girl quickly realizes it's a lie and playfully points it out, accusing him of clearly thinking about something else entirely. She pretends to be upset that he's lost in his own world right in front of her, and complains that he should have ordered hot chocolate instead of something so bitter. The young man stammers another apology, but is completely surprised when she reveals that it took her 2 whole hours to get to that moment. The girl explains that this was exactly the amount of time she spent getting ready in front of the bedroom mirror, focusing on every detail of her makeup. Seonwoo admits that it took him a long time to choose the perfect outfit for that special date with him. Hearing that she dedicated so much effort and time just to see him, Jinyoung is speechless as she asks him to stop getting lost in his thoughts. With an incredibly charming and seductive look, Seonwoo leans across the table and demands that the young man pay close attention only to her from now on. The boy feels the impact of those words and admits internally that it was indeed very rude of him to ignore the presence of a girl who had tried so hard for him. Seonwoo gets up from the table with a smile and says that, since he invited her to the theater, she'll forgive his distraction this time. Jinyoung thanks her for the apology and also gets up hurriedly when the girl informs him that the deadline has arrived and that they both need to go. The boy makes his final decision, resolving to put aside all his doubts and fears to focus solely on enjoying every second of that special moment with Seonwoo. Shortly after, the two are already settled in the theater watching the beginning of the play, which features a very detailed set of an old town square with 2 actors on stage. The lead actress dramatically extends her hand mid-scene and utters the classic passionate lament, calling out the name of her beloved Romeo. The actor in the white wig then responds with a comical and irritated grimace, explaining that his name is simply chosen by his mother. On stage, the actor continues the scene comically, reprimanding his partner for not knowing the reason for her name and calling her a silly girl. While the play unfolds, Jinyoung and Seonwoo watch the story go by with boredom, yawning and finding it all quite monotonous. Cut to a flashback of the two in an arcade, where Seonwoo is charmed by an adorable plush toy and Jinyoung immediately offers to try and win it for her. The scene shows Jinyoung frustrated, recounting that he's already spent $20 trying to catch the toy, while Seonwoo watches his attempt with an amused chuckle. Later in the outing, the couple enjoys themselves at a karaoke bar, with Jinyoung singing enthusiastically while Seonwoo laughs at his lack of musical talent. Later, at a restaurant, Xianwu takes on the role of the attentive one and offers to cut Jinyang's steak, who shyly thanks her for the kind gesture. As she walked through the streets at night, Xianwu took advantage of the proximity to curiously ask about Jinyang's relationship with Sejong, observing how close the two seemed to be. Jinyang responds promptly, and the girl listens to the explanation with a glint in her eye and a charming blush on her cheeks. The two continue walking side by side along the quiet city sidewalks under the soft glow of the nightlights. As they approached Xianwu's house, she sighed in relief and commented that the whole outing had been really fun. She politely thanks the young man for accompanying her to her door, and Jinyang helpfully says it was no problem at all. Xianwu bids him farewell with a radiant smile, wishing him a safe journey home, and Jinyang responds with a simple nod. However, just as she is about to turn around, her smile fades and she stands there, staring at him with a doubtful expression. Jinyang notices that she's looking at him hesitantly, as if she wants to say something, and he himself feels nervous, wanting to find the right words. He takes a deep breath, gathering the courage to finally admit how much he enjoyed every moment he spent with her that day. While Xianwu waits, Jinyang decides to open up and reveal his sincerest wish that the two of them continue to go out alone together in the future. He eagerly awaits her agreement to the idea and to agree to go out with him again at a future opportunity. The girl calls him by name, visibly surprised by his initiative and the expectant look he carries. Jinyang lets out a nervous laugh, wanting to ease the tension of the moment and prepare for whatever her reaction might be. He tries to maintain his composure and says goodbye casually, mentioning they'll see each other at school, but the girl seems confused by his tone. Xianwu lightly punches the boy's shoulder, complaining that he acted insecurely for no reason and that he made her nervous for nothing. With a hurried apology, Jinyang turns and begins to walk away, feeling his heart racing. He walks a little and stops suddenly, lost in his own thoughts about what just happened. Jinyang reflects on his immense desire to reunite with Xianwu, but feels the weight of his insecurities. The young man continues his walk, feeling genuinely frightened by the real possibility of being rejected by her if he decides to be more direct. Just imagining her response being something like a vague "maybe next time" sends a chill down his spine. Jinyang believes it might be safer to leave things as they are, since getting too close will only make him increasingly uncomfortable. He reflects that the entire meeting wasn't planned by him but pushed by the teacher, which makes him suspect she may have only refused out of politeness. While recalling everything that happened 5 years ago, the boy becomes convinced that he needs practice to deal with these feelings. Her desperate plan, once again, is to resort to her mental armor and try to see Xianwu as if she were just a cold rock. Jinyang reaffirms to himself that he needs to accomplish this feat as quickly as possible, before the bond between them becomes uncontrollable. His thoughts are interrupted when he hears Xianwu calling him from afar, suggesting that next time he choose something better than an espresso. He turns around, looking at her with an expression of surprise at her concern. The two remain standing there for a moment, facing each other under the night sky. Xianwu smiles and suggests that next time he order hot chocolate, making a direct reference to their conversation. Jinyang stares at the girl, sensing the internal conflict between his feelings and his need for protection. Jason, lost in thought, observes the scene with the gaze of someone who knows that hesitation all too well. The imaginary friend questions sternly whether Jinyang is truly willing to turn Xianwu into a stone in his mind, just to escape reality. Jason, in a supportive position, comments that running away from what scares us is one way to deal with the problem, but questions whether that's what he wants. Jinyang calls out for Jason, feeling confronted by his own conscience and the memory of the past. The young man questions his own appearance and the attitude he should adopt in the face of all this. Jason continues to tease, reminding Jinyang that he had to ask someone else to take the initiative for him on that date. The imaginary friend recalls every detail of the day, from the moment he got distracted at the cafe to his request for her to cut his meat, proving that he was paralyzed by fear. Jason points out that the boy is now thinking of backing down only because he doesn't know how to handle the growing closeness between the two. He throws it in Jinyang's face that his solution to any crisis is, invariably, to use the same old technique. Jason tries to soften his stance, admitting that perhaps he was too harsh, but justifies it by saying he's simply stating the facts as they really are. The big guy sighs, reinforcing his frustration with the boy's hesitation. Jason is direct and calls Jinyang a loser, leaving the boy visibly shaken by the criticism. Meanwhile, the memory of a tender moment between the two emerges as a contrast to Jinyang's conflict. Currently, Xianwu and Jinyang remain there, holding hands, in that moment of connection that he so desperately wants to protect, but which he also so greatly fears. Xianwu looks at him extremely surprised upon hearing him speak suddenly. With a somewhat awkward look, Jinyoung sincerely apologizes and promises that next time he will take her to see a much better play. He explains that he realized she had fallen asleep because the show was so boring, so this new invitation would be his way of apologizing for the boredom. Hearing those kind words, Seonwoo was completely speechless, staring at the boy with flushed cheeks. Suddenly, she breaks into a radiant smile and lets out a delightful laugh, breaking through the tense atmosphere that had formed. The girl jokingly confesses that she was just waiting to see when he would finally work up the courage to say something like that. Still a little embarrassed, Jinyoung insists on apologizing, promising that on their next date he'll take her to a much more fun place. He continues to lament the fact that she got so bored that she fell asleep in the middle of the theater, feeling quite guilty about it. Seonwoo observes him silently for a brief moment, seemingly surprised by the boy's level of concern. She can't contain herself and bursts into laughter again at his clumsy behavior. The girl is keen to emphasize that she was really looking forward to hearing that promise of a future outing from him. The two remain standing very close together in the middle of the sidewalk, sharing a moment of silence under the streetlights. Without Jinyoung realizing it in the heat of the moment, their hands end up joining in a very soft and affectionate touch. As soon as he realizes he's holding Seonwoo's hand, the boy gets a huge fright and feels his heart race. In utter panic, he immediately lets go of her hand and begins to apologize desperately, while the girl just smiles, asking him to calm down. With a mischievous look, she says that next time she wants him to share any worries he has on his mind, because that way the date will be much more fun, leaving the young man looking forward to tomorrow. Seonwoo bids him a cheerful farewell, spinning on her heels and wishing him a safe trip home, to which Jinyoung replies, wishing her the same. The boy remains standing on the sidewalk, clutching his chest as he watches the girl's silhouette fade into the distance. As he walks back home in the evening breeze, Seonwoo also adopts a thoughtful and serene expression. The girl places her hand on her chest with an extremely sweet smile and flushed cheeks, clearly shaken by everything that has happened. The following day, the morning sunlight illuminates the neighborhood park, ushering in a new day for the residents. Jinyoung breathes heavily and panting, trying to focus all his physical energy on his morning exercise. He decides to release all his pent-up tension by doing a series of iron pull-ups in the park's recreation area, with little Jason watching closely. While his imaginary friend counts the repetitions on his shoulder, Jinyoung confesses that he always resorts to heavy workouts whenever his head is full of worries. The boy can't stop thinking about the promise he made to Seonwoo that there would be a next time for the two of them, which changes everything. The hulking Jason appears in life-size on the bench next to them and congratulates the young man on his courageous decision to finally overcome his fear of rejection and approach her, receiving thanks from his friend. However, Jinyoung knows that putting this into practice is much more difficult than it seems, and wonders how she will manage to take the next step with Seonwoo after all. Suddenly, Sukyoung appears walking nearby and directly asks how many sets of exercises he still has left to finish. Still focused on the bars, Jinyoung replies that there are still 3 sets to go, complaining about how his joints usually ache during training. Without him expecting it, the troublemaker sneaks up behind him and calls him over in a rather provocative tone of voice. Jinyoung lets out a terrified cry from the sudden fright, demanding to know who she is, while the girl is quite amused by his startled reaction. Sukyoung confidently introduces herself, wearing her pink tracksuit and patterned pajama pants. She breaks into a wide smile and comments on the incredible coincidence of the two of them bumping into each other right there that morning. The boy stares at her, a little confused for a moment, trying to connect that name to his memory. That's when he notices the familiar stone-like shape on her head and immediately remembers that she's Seonwoo's friend. Sukyoung points to the iron structure and orders the boy to go back to doing the repetitions from before, leaving him confused about the reason for the order. Without wanting to argue, Jinyoung simply accepts the instruction and hangs himself from the metal bar again. But then the girl lets out a hysterical and terrifying scream right next to him, taking him completely by surprise. Sukyoung lands a precise kick that knocks Jinyoung off the bar, indignantly complaining that no one should exercise in such an incorrect way. The boy falls awkwardly and rolls on the park grass, feeling considerable pain from the unexpected impact. Massaging his aching head, he complains irritably and questions what on earth she thinks she's doing attacking him out of nowhere. The girl calmly explains that if he continues training with that awful posture, he'll only end up destroying his joints instead of getting healthy. Without giving him time to respond, Sukyoung decisively announces that she's going home to change and orders him to wait there. Jinyoung tries to protest, saying she still has several sets of exercises to finish, but she simply ignores her and keeps walking. She turns around imposingly and repeats that he must wait for her there in the park, making the young man finally give in and agree without much choice. Watching the girl walk away, Jinyoung scratches his head, intrigued by her bossy and strange personality. Suddenly, Jason reappears, deep in thought on the park bench, commenting that this unusual situation is actually an excellent opportunity. Jinyoung curiously asks what his friend means by that, and the big guy reminds him of that famous war strategy about knowing your opponent well before any battle. The boy agrees, recalling that in the past they had tried that tactic of gathering information about Seonwoo by talking to their classmate Jumin. Jason points out that back then, the plan was to find out more about the girl just to avoid being overwhelmed by her charm, but now the main goal is to get truly close to Seonwoo. Jinyoung quickly understands the hint and concludes that it would be a good idea to casually start a conversation with Sukyoung about her friend, receiving confirmation from Jason. The imaginary friend fully agrees and adds that, at the very least, the girl will be much more helpful than the gossipy Jumin. It doesn't take long for Sukyoung to return to the training grounds with a slightly refreshed look. The boy notices the change and asks what she changed, and the girl replies obviously that she just changed her pants and shoes to train better. The friendly conversation almost turns into a fight when Jinyoung comments that he can't tell the difference because she still looks like a rock to him, deeply irritating the girl. Putting the teasing aside, Sukyoung tells the boy to do just one repetition on the iron bar so she can assess his posture. While getting ready, Jinyoung tries to be casual and asks if she's really that close to Seonwoo, catching her off guard. The girl confirms that yes and questions why he's suddenly interested in her friend, until it dawns on her. With a knowing smile, she instantly deduces that he has a crush on Seonwoo, leaving the boy completely shocked that he was discovered so quickly. Feeling incredibly awkward, Jinyoung stammers, trying to claim it was just a silly, unimportant curiosity, but Sukyoung doesn't fall for it at all. She scoffs at his excuse, stating that even a chicken passing by on the street would be able to notice the obvious interest he has in her. To prove her point, the girl points to a real rooster pecking around in the park and jokes that even the bird is agreeing, leaving Jinyoung indignant at the presence of that bird there. The boy decides to get serious and comments that winning Seonwoo's heart must be very difficult, deducing that the biggest obstacle is her immense popularity. Sukyoung agrees that this is only part of the truth, indicating that there are much deeper reasons behind it. She tries to find the right words and reveals that, in fact, Seonwoo is quite a mysterious and difficult person to decipher. The girl explains that, although her friend is extremely friendly with everyone and very easy to get along with at school, appearances can be deceiving. She admits that despite spending a lot of time together in the classroom, the girl's emotional barrier is very strong. Sukyoung confesses that, even though she spends every day with Seonwoo, she still feels like she has no idea what's really going on in her friend's head. She reveals that, no matter how much they joke around, talk, or make fun of each other, Seonwoo almost never opens up about his personal life or intimate feelings. To his childhood friend, there's always the distinct impression that Seonwoo is someone who carries a multitude of closely guarded secrets. Despite this, Sukyoung is proud to be her closest friend and gives Jinyoung a very clear warning to prepare himself, because his heart will still suffer a lot because of this. Hearing that warning about Seonwoo being mysterious, Jinyoung remembers Jumin saying something similar and wonders if there's some crucial detail about the girl that he's missing. His thoughts are interrupted by Sukyoung telling him to hurry up with the exercises, while he tries to convince himself that he never felt anything strange around his beloved. Before he can get lost in his thoughts again, Sukyoung delivers a kick that sends him flying, telling the boy not to yawn during practice. Jinyoung complains of pain and questions why she's demanding so much perfection from him, asking if she happens to be some kind of sports expert. The girl asks him back if he thinks she's weak, and the boy honestly replies that, seeing her only as a gray stone, it's impossible to say. With a confident smile full of ulterior motives, she decides it's time to prove what she's capable of. Sukyoung unzips her jacket and slides it off her shoulders, revealing her athletic physique and taking the boy by surprise. She strikes a commanding pose, showing off her defined shoulders in a sports top, and playfully tells him to be careful not to fall in love with her too. Jinyoung is completely stunned and speechless at such a sudden change in appearance. To the young man's dismay, his vision projects a gray stone statue with an incredibly muscular and defined body right in front of him. He disguises his embarrassment by commenting that she's full of herself, and the girl just smiles slightly, fully agreeing with the comment. Far from there, the movement of people walking along the park's trails remains calm and peaceful. A girl walks calmly holding a plastic shopping bag after going to the market. This is Seonwoo, who is taking advantage of his day off to walk through the park wearing comfortable sportswear and a dark cap. During her journey, she ends up overhearing the idle chatter of some female students who pass by right next to her. The girls are excitedly gossiping about secretly finding their school's physical education teacher extremely attractive. The girls continue their debate, speculating about his age, while Seonwoo adjusts his cap and realizes that the girls are his classmates. The gossips continue to comment on a possible interest the professor might have in Professor Hanjeol, believing that the two are completely incompatible. Seonwoo continues on her way in absolute silence, keeping her head down so as not to be noticed by her colleagues. She lets out a long sigh of discouragement until she is interrupted by loud shouts coming from the park's exercise area. Curious about the noise, the girl turns her face toward the commotion to see what's happening nearby. She finds Sukyoung firmly correcting Jinyoung's posture on the iron bar, while the boy complains of exhaustion from the physical exertion. Sukyoung demands 3 more repetitions despite his protest for leniency, while Seonwoo watches the scene with an enigmatic expression. The pretty girl attentively watches the boy's effort to stand on the structure under the energetic commands of her friend. Seeing the two so close and having fun together, Seonwoo feels his cheeks flush slightly beneath his dark cap. Sukyoung finally loses patience with the boy's slowness and delivers another kick to get him out of there, telling the boy to make room so she can show him how it's done. The troublemaker hangs decisively from the metal bar, preparing to begin the demonstration. She instructs the boy to focus his strength on his back before beginning the upward movement. Sukyoung executes the exercise flawlessly and with extreme agility, showcasing all her impressive physical strength to the boy. Jinyoung tries to counter his colleague's scolding, questioning whether the exercise is really that difficult or if there's any real difference in their posture, while Seonwoo simply observes the discussion from afar. The boy suddenly turns around, noticing a familiar presence behind him, and comes face to face with the beautiful Seonwoo, who stares at him curiously. The pretty girl nods with a sweet smile and compliments Sukyoung's flawless performance on the pole, leaving Jinyoung completely paralyzed with shock at the surprise appearance. Upon hearing the compliment, Sukyoung immediately drops the bar and excitedly runs to hug her dear friend, while the boy remains panicked, not understanding how she always appears out of nowhere. While watching the two chatting happily, Jinyoung resigns himself to the fact that the girl has an unavoidable habit of showing up at the most unexpected moments. Sukyoung explains the whole situation in an animated way, saying that Jinyoung was doing the exercises incorrectly and that she was just trying to teach him the correct posture. Seonwoo finds his friend's teacher-like instincts amusing and notices the rooster pecking around, commenting that he finds the bird quite cute despite the mystery of how it got there. Then she turns towards Jinyoung, instantly making the boy nervous under the gaze of that striking look. The boy blushes slightly and waves rather awkwardly as he greets her, while she responds in a very sweet and friendly manner. Seonwoo walks to the bar and confesses that she finds that type of exercise impossible for her, explaining that the simple act of hanging from it would already be a huge challenge. Jinyoung tries to joke that this is perfectly normal for someone suffering from chronic anemia, but ends up stammering an apology when the girl pretends to be offended. Sukyoung quickly interrupts the conversation and offers to give her friend a little push to help her test the exercise, which Seonwoo accepts in a good-natured way. The troublemaker orders Jinyoung to take the front position to count Seonwoo's replays, and the boy obeys automatically and awkwardly. Sukyoung helps her friend up carefully, instructing her not to be afraid and to try to pull herself up slowly and steadily. Seonwoo struggles to perform the movement, commenting that the iron bar is much heavier than she imagined, even with help. At that moment, the girl looks down and her eyes widen in surprise as she notices the boy's behavior right in front of her. Jinyoung remains completely still and in absolute silence, staring at the girl with an extremely focused and fixed gaze. The boy doesn't look away for a single second, making the atmosphere around them incredibly tense and awkward. Seonwoo notices that direct gaze and feels her cheeks burn with embarrassment, becoming completely disconcerted by the boy's proximity. Sukyoung complains that her friend has stopped trying and demands that she continue climbing, but Seonwoo is too nervous to focus on the exercise. The pretty girl tries to do one more repetition with flushed cheeks, but embarrassment ends up draining all her physical strength. She is completely lost in the shyness of being stared at in such an intimate way by the boy. However, the great irony is that Jinyoung's mind was actually on another planet, racking his brain trying to understand the mystery of where that rooster from before came from. Oblivious to his reverie, Seonwoo remains blushing with embarrassment as she tries to hold onto the iron structure with trembling hands. As a result of nervousness and cold sweat, the girl's hands end up slipping from the metal and she completely loses control of her body. She lets out a startled scream and falls violently backward, tumbling directly onto Sukyoung, who is trying to hold her. Jinyoung is startled by the noise and turns his face, confused, only to find the two girls sprawled on the park floor. He approaches and curtly asks what the two are doing on the floor, leaving them even more embarrassed by the ridiculous situation. The boy immediately lectures Xianwu, blaming her anemia for the fall, but the girl angrily retorts, insisting that the reason for the fall was something quite different. Feeling incredibly awkward, Xianwu quickly apologizes to his hurt friend under Jinyang's analytical gaze. Lying on the grass, Sukyung seethes with anger upon realizing that all that mess happened because Jinyang was daydreaming, instead of focusing on counting the exercises. The girl warns that she has completely lost her patience because of the two's carelessness, leaving Xianwu desperate with her friend's fury. With a terrifying strength that would make any athlete envious, Sukyung lifts Xianwu into the air and vows to finish them both off right there. The park echoes with Jinyang and Xianwu's desperate cries for apology as they try to escape the wrath of the troublemaker girl. Later, the neighborhood sky begins to take on beautiful orange hues as the sun sets. Jinyang and Xianwu walk side by side back home under the golden light of dusk. The boy sighs, commenting on how exhausted that bizarre workout left him, and Xianwu timidly replies, reminding him that she didn't actually exercise for real. He kindly suggests that perhaps she should train more often with her friend to improve her physical fitness, and Xianwu accepts the idea with a very sweet smile. In his thoughts, Jinyang reflects that in the end he didn't manage to discover almost anything new about her life with that park spying tactic. Despite this, the boy admits he had a lot of fun with her, and the muscular Jason agrees that plans of this kind should proceed very slowly and gradually. Reaching the fork in the road, Jinyang points in the direction of his street and bids the girl farewell, wishing her to be careful. He nods, promising to meet her at school the next day, but notices Xianwu hesitating with a somewhat sad and disappointed look. Concerned, the boy turns around again and asks if something is wrong or if she would like to tell him something important. Xianwu looks away for a brief second, thinking about how to express what he truly feels in the face of such an untimely farewell. But she decides to hide it and flashes a radiant, warm smile under the orange light of the late afternoon. The girl lies, saying it was just a silly curiosity on her part, and bids farewell with a cheerful wave as she continues on her way home. Jinyang continues his walk back home, quite confused by her enigmatic behavior and strange reactions. Right at that moment, Jason appears, letting out a dramatic and tired sigh, making the boy question the reason for so much lamentation. The imaginary friend confesses with a somewhat awkward smile that, although he himself doesn't perfectly understand the hearts of women, the young man's situation is worrying. Jason is keen to point out that he has the distinct and strong impression that Jinyang just gave the girl the most wrong and insensitive response possible at that moment. Jinyang asks, intrigued, what the wrong part of his attitude would be, but Jason simply refuses to answer immediately and tells his friend to reflect on the matter on the way home. The boy complains about his imaginary friend's harsh tone, while Jason questions him about when he's finally going to stop making such stupid and clueless decisions at crucial moments. As he continues on his way, Xianwu gets another huge shock when he realizes that the same pesky rooster from before is still following him along the neighborhood sidewalk. The scene cuts to a flashback to a dark night, when Sujung decided to go up to the school's rooftop after school to enjoy the silence of that wide-open space. The girl stretched her arms out to the night sky, believing that at this hour of the night, only a few staff members or teachers would still be in the school building. But her tranquility vanished completely when a soft, melodic piano sound began to echo mysteriously through the room. Intrigued, Sujung approached the grate and realized that the musical notes were coming directly from inside the main building. She knew the music room was located on the very top floor of the school and wondered who on earth would be playing the piano so late at night. But in the next second, a chilling shiver ran down the girl's spine as she listened more closely to the melody. The main point is that the music was so beautiful and well performed that it left her paralyzed with admiration and astonishment at such talent. Back in the reality of school, Sujung gestures excitedly as she tells that suspenseful story to Xianwu, Jinyang, and the gossipy Juman. Jinyang complains about her classmates' dramatic tone, while Xianwu shrinks back in fear, admitting that the story is scaring her quite a bit. In the boy's mind, even the brave Jason appears cowering and trembling with fear, remembering his legendary battles against famous ghosts. Sujung ignores the boy's complaints and remains intrigued, unable to believe that someone at the school possesses such musical talent. That's when Juman joins the conversation and asks with a mysterious look if her classmate really doesn't know the school's urban legend about the subject. The big guy reveals that there's a scary rumor going around the hallways about the mysterious ghost in the music room. He goes on to narrate that a long time ago there was a student who spent all her nights locked in that room playing the piano, until one fateful day during practice things went wrong. Sujung is horrified to learn that the girl died suddenly at the scene and questions the reason for such a tragedy. Juman explains somewhat vaguely that rumors say the student accidentally choked on a candy she was eating while playing. The big guy adds in a ghostly tone that, ever since then, people swear they hear the piano melody echoing through the room even when the place is completely empty and locked. With a chilling smile, he concludes that the sound his colleague heard the other night was most likely a performance by a ghost. The trio of friends stare at the boy with expressions ranging from pure disbelief to absolute terror. Jinyong remains skeptical and thinks to himself that this is the most ridiculous ghost story he has ever heard in his life. However, looking to the side, the young man notices that his beloved is sweating profusely, terrified by her colleague's account. Xianwu confesses with a trembling voice that he found the story extremely terrifying, confirming the boy's worst fears. Jinyong concludes surprised that despite appearing very confident in everyday life, the beautiful girl is secretly quite shy and fearful of supernatural matters. The somber conversation is interrupted when Professor Hanjiol appears in the hallway calling out to Jinyong and Xianwu. With her arms crossed, the teacher announces that the two arrived at the perfect moment and orders them to accompany her to the teacher's room to help with some tasks. Xianwu immediately accepts the invitation with a relieved smile, pulling the boy by the arm to escape quickly and leave the gossips behind. As soon as the two walk away, Sujung crosses his arms and asks Juman if that scary legend about the piano was really true. With a wicked little smile, the big guy shamelessly confesses that he just made up that whole ridiculous story simply to have fun with their terrified faces. He boasts about his successful lie upon seeing how genuinely terrified Xianwu became, leaving his colleague extremely irritated by such foolishness. Sujung stares at him in absolute silence, his gaze filled with deep judgment and contempt for his colleague's childish behavior. She murmurs to herself that that big guy is a real lunatic with no sense of limits. The scene cuts to dusk at the school, with the moon shining in the sky above the main building and the lights in the windows beginning to dim. Jinyong and Xianwu walk wearily down the dark hallway, with the boy commenting on how exhausting it was to help the teacher grade all those tests. The boy notices that his beloved is walking very slowly and stiffly beside him, seeming quite tense. He asks if she's feeling all right, noticing that the girl's expression is visibly downcast and pale. Panicked, Xianwu grabs the sleeve of his jacket and forces a nervous smile, trying to pretend that everything is perfectly normal. Jinyong is suspicious of her exaggerated reaction and asks if all this nervousness is because of that silly legend her colleague told earlier in the hallway. The pretty girl vehemently denies it, shouting, slapping his arm and insisting that ghosts don't exist and that she's not afraid of anything. Despite her apologies, Jinyong notices how much she's trembling as she murmurs about the girl who choked on the candy, confirming that the story deeply affected her. Suddenly, the couple's argument is interrupted when musical notes from a piano begin to echo eerily through the dark hallway of the school. The two instantly freeze in terror, and Jinyong whispers, unable to believe he's actually listening to music at this hour of the night. The boy tries to stay focused and points out that the somber melody seems to be coming directly from the direction of the music room upstairs. Xianwu becomes completely desperate when he realizes the situation is identical to the earlier legend, asking with wide eyes if it could really be a haunting. Jinyong tries to calm her down by rationalizing that it must just be some dedicated student who stayed late rehearsing, but she quickly interrupts his reasoning. Looking towards the end of the silent corridor, the two are confronted by a dark and mysterious figure hovering in the shadows. The dark silhouette floats in the air, displaying two bright white eyes that stare at the young people in the deep darkness of the school. Even trembling with nervousness at the terrifying apparition, Jinyong tries to convince himself that there must be some explanation from a student present. Seeing his girlfriend trembling uncontrollably, Jinyong realizes that she is far from calm amidst the whole situation. The panic intensifies when the boy notices the dark figure with glowing eyes beginning to glide down the hallway directly toward them. Xianwu can't take the pressure and lets out an extremely high-pitched scream of terror as he sees the apparition approaching. Shouting that the ghost of the girl who choked on the candy is coming to get them, the girl turns around and runs upstairs, leaving the boy completely surprised. Jinyong tries to call her back, desperately asking where she's going amidst all that panic. The boy runs after her and shouts that if her intention was to escape, the most logical thing to do would have been to run down the stairs, not to the top of the building. As the pair flee in desperation, the mysterious figure reveals itself to be just Professor Hanjiol, who is left wondering why the two ran away from her as if they had seen a ghost. Adjusting her glasses, the teacher sighs wearily and wonders if her look with that dark coat really makes her look like a ghost in the dark. She makes a rather deflated and disappointed face at her students' frightened reaction. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to the silent rooftop of the college under the soft glow of the crescent moon. Jinyoung rushes through the access doors and finally reaches the open terrace area, breathless from running. He looks around with wide eyes, trying to locate the girl in the dim light. To his dismay, the boy finds Xianwu lying awkwardly on the concrete floor of the terrace. Worried, he rushes to find out what happened, and the girl complains about the stairs, while Jinyoung deduces that the fall was probably due to her anemia. Xianwu angrily retorted, saying the real problem was a dark figure that lunged at her in the hallway, but Jinyoung tried to calm her down, explaining it was just a person in the dark. The girl blames her classmate Jumin for putting those scary ideas in her head with that frightening story, until a new musical note coming from downstairs makes her freeze in terror again. The two remain motionless in the middle of the empty terrace, while the soft piano melody floats mysteriously through the air once more. Jinyoung crosses his arms thoughtfully, admitting that the sound is indeed intriguing and that it makes perfect sense for people to create urban legends when things like this happen. Seeing the girl's despair and trembling beside him, the boy realizes he urgently needs to find a way to calm her down once and for all. That's when his imaginary friend Jason appears in his thoughts, dressed up as a movie vampire, claiming that all that fear is actually a golden opportunity. Jason confidently explains that the suspenseful atmosphere is the perfect opportunity for the boy to truly get closer to Xianwu. With a perceptive smile behind his mustache, the big man points out that when a couple faces a moment of great fear together, a very strong psychological effect usually kicks in. And Jason's theory proves true when Xianwu's trembling hand slowly reaches out towards Jinyoung's arm. The boy is slightly startled when he feels the gentle, sudden touch of his beloved on his jacket. With a rather hesitant and timid voice, she tries to contain her nervousness at the approach. Holding tightly onto the boy's sleeve, Xianwu admits that the whole situation is truly terrifying her. With flushed cheeks, Jinyoung feels his heart beat faster as he realizes what is happening there. He remembers that famous psychological theory popularly known as the suspension bridge effect. The young man becomes thoughtful as he analyzes the physical proximity the two have so suddenly achieved on the terrace. Xianwu continues murmuring softly, completely lost in that feeling of dependence and the need for protection. She admits that the piano sound is truly frightening her, while continuing to hold tightly to his arm. For Jinyoung, that scene perfectly defines the exact moment when mutual attraction begins to intensify under the influence of fear. He knows that the stress of a dangerous or frightening situation has the power to bring two people together incredibly quickly. Although she had read about this romantic theory before in her internet research, experiencing it firsthand was quite different. Ultimately, the theory states that when someone holds another's hand tightly in a moment of danger, the brain confuses the adrenaline of fear with passion. But Jinyoung notices a small detail that ruins Jason's plan. The boy concludes that trying to use the suspension bridge effect now is impossible, simply because the piano music they are listening to is too cheerful and lively to cause any fear. He notices that Xianwu's own expression begins to change and soften, indicating that she too has perceived the comforting tone of the melody and is no longer afraid. Trying to lighten the mood, Jinyoung lets out an awkward laugh and comments that the ghost actually plays very well, receiving immediate agreement from the girl. Xianwu pays attention to the beat and identifies the rhythm as a waltz, leaving the boy quite surprised by her technical knowledge of music. The pretty girl smiles nostalgically and reveals that she used to attend ballroom dancing classes when she was just a little girl. She recalls laughing when she was paired with her classmate Jumin in kindergarten, and how often the two of them would fight and throw tantrums with the teacher to avoid dancing together. The girl explains that she ended up giving up dancing to focus on her art classes because she enjoyed drawing much more, and also because her health had become more fragile over time. Despite past disagreements, Xianwu admits that Jumin has always been a true dance prodigy, leaving Jinyoung shocked by the revelation. The boy tries to process the information, but finds it completely impossible to imagine that chubby and clumsy classmate dancing with such lightness and agility. He comments amicably that the experience must have been very fun and memorable, admitting that ballroom dancing is something totally outside his area of study. The girl bites her finger thoughtfully, confessing that her memories of that childhood period are somewhat vague because it happened so long ago. With a mischievous smile and blushing cheeks under the moonlight, Xianwu remarks that since the school ghost is being so kind as to provide that piano soundtrack in the background, they should take advantage of it. She extends her delicate hand towards Jinyoung and asks him to hold it at once, catching him completely off guard with her bold move. The boy hesitated, stammering, not understanding the reason for the request, but the girl insisted very sweetly that he not take so long, making him timidly accept the invitation. To the cheerful notes of the nighttime melody, Xianwu's hand slides smoothly until it rests fully in the boy's open palm. To the soft sound of that mysterious melody, the two finally join hands and prepare to begin the waltz. Xianwu pulls his dance partner along to begin the next step with a radiant smile, while Jinyang tries in vain to contain his nervousness at her approach. But the romantic moment is painfully ruined when the clumsy boy ends up stomping hard right on the girl's bare foot. Xianwu lets out a sharp cry of pain and crouches on the concrete floor clutching his injured foot, while the boy in despair bows excessively, begging for forgiveness. The girl tries to reassure him with tears in her eyes, explaining that it wasn't his fault, since her leg hasn't fully recovered from the kick she received at school. Despite the lingering pain, she stands up with a determined look and extends her hand to Jinyang again, inviting him to try once more. Jinyang awkwardly nods in agreement, but the moment she spins him around quickly, he completely loses his balance. The boy's feet awkwardly get tangled in his black striped sandals during the quick spin. The boy plummeted violently onto the concrete floor of the terrace, suffering a fall worthy of a clumsy beginner. Xianwu can't contain himself and bursts into laughter, pointing out how unbelievably bad he is at it, while Jinyang complains of pain, rubbing his injured nose. Despite her clumsy falls, she gazes at him with an extremely tender look and a slight blush of amusement on her face. The boy asks her, lying on the floor, if she really wants to continue with that torturous dance, and she cheerfully assures him that she sees no problem in trying again. With a sadistic yet playful look, Xianwu makes it very clear that if he steps on her foot again, she'll make sure to break his in retaliation. Jinyang agrees with a shy smile and accepts that he needs to be taught the right way by the girl if he wants it to work. He takes a breath and, in an unexpectedly dramatic and chivalrous gesture, throws himself to his knees on the ground, extending his hand to her like a prince. The boy's sudden, theatrical behavior leaves Xianwu completely stunned and speechless for a few moments. But soon her surprise turns into a radiant smile, touched by his dedication. She joins in the fun with all the charm in the world and extends her hand, elegantly accepting the invitation to dance together under the starry sky. Jinyang watches her from below, his cheeks flushed, his heart racing at the sight of her beauty. While the couple shares that romantic moment on the terrace, the soft piano melody continues to echo faintly, keeping alive the famous legend of the school's ghost. Jason appears elegantly dressed, savoring a glass of wine in his mind, commenting on how that mysterious nighttime melody that frightened everyone remained unexplained. The big guy recalls that the legend of the music room ghost was born precisely because of the fear and absurd superstitions created in people's minds. He realizes that the truth behind any story depends solely on the point of view of whoever is listening to it at the moment. And for Jinyang and Xianwu, that very eerie melody had just transformed into the most romantic and unforgettable gift of their school lives. The silence of the night returns to the facade of the school's main building as the lights begin to be turned off. Outside the school, Jinyang tries to break the ice by bringing up a detail from their previous conversation that intrigued him. He asks if she still practices her drawings, and Xianwu confirms with a cheerful smile that yes, drawing remains her great passion. Taking advantage of the revelation, Jinyang shyly stammers as he asks her to draw an incredibly muscular, bearded, and strong guy for him in the future. The pretty girl finds the unusual request amusing, and although she admits she doesn't have much practice drawing people, promises to do her best to fulfill it. The young man becomes quite thoughtful as he walks beside her, admitting to himself that he had no idea of her interest in art. He feels that there is also a special activity or hobby that he would like to share with her in the future to grow even closer. Xianwu interrupts the walk and hurriedly announces that she urgently needs to make a quick stop at the school bathroom before they leave for good. Jinyang asks her, worried, if she'll be alright alone there, and the girl responds with a confident nod, indicating she'll return in a flash. The boy agrees somewhat hesitantly, but senses that there is something extremely bizarre and incoherent about the whole situation. He tries to organize his thoughts, finding it completely absurd that a girl who is literally trembling with fear of ghosts just minutes before would have the courage to enter a dark school all alone. The boy, arms crossed, wonders if she somehow managed to overcome all that fear so quickly and unbelievably. Jason reappears thoughtfully at the edge of the sidewalk, fully agreeing with his friend's doubts and declaring that the girl's entire behavior is extremely suspicious. Jinyang curiously asks what his imaginary friend is deducing, and Jason reminds him of that same psychological theory about the suspension bridge effect that they were trying to apply. The burly, mustachioed advisor stares at the boy with a serious look and reveals that he has just devised a revolutionary and impressive theory about the situation. Jason's theory is that all of Xianwu's fear was actually a brilliant and carefully planned act, orchestrated by her from the very first second, just so she could get physically close to him. And the theory proves frighteningly true when Xianwu appears calmly looking at himself in the school bathroom mirror, fixing his makeup with all the tranquility in the world. With a victorious smile on her face, the girl scoffs at the urban legend, admitting to herself that ghosts are obviously nothing more than childish nonsense. Despite the success of her Machiavellian plan to get closer, she complains quietly that Jinyang's stomp on her injured foot is still hurting quite a bit, playfully calling her beloved a brute. Meanwhile, the door to the famous music room remains ajar under the soft light of the hallway. A delicate hand slides open the wooden door, and a voice gently asks if today's piano practice is finally over. It's Professor Han Jiol, who calmly announces that it's already extremely late and orders the student to pack her things and leave. The person sitting at the piano is the young Yo-jin, who looks away thoughtfully when called by her name. With a sad and timid expression, the short-haired student lowers her head in response to the reprimand. Yo-jin whispers, asking permission to play just one last melody before leaving, but the teacher, distracted, doesn't hear and tells her to hurry home. The young woman awkwardly apologizes for the delay and closes the piano, bringing an end to that night's rehearsals under the starry sky of the school. It all begins when a group of girls in the classroom questions Xianwu about what she really thinks regarding all the school gossip. They discuss the fact that the pretty girl is always extremely friendly and gets along very well with absolutely everyone at school. Xianwu smiled slightly, commenting that she couldn't say for sure, since she herself doesn't usually focus much on other people's opinions about her school life. The scene cuts to the second-grade classroom sign, indicating the start of another school term. Sitting alone at her desk, Xianwu rests her chin on her hand while holding a pen, lost in her own thoughts. She bites the end of her pen thoughtfully, clearly distracted by some recent memory in her head. The girl's mind drifts back to the unusual request Jinyang made the previous night, begging her to draw a strong, bearded man. She sighs, realizing that the drawing description is too broad and mysterious for her to illustrate without more details. Determined to resolve this dilemma, Xianwu gets up from the table intending to go to the boy's room to ask him to explain the drawing better. But as soon as she opens the door to the room, she is interrupted by someone enthusiastically calling her name from the hallway. Two classmates run up to her and ask if she has a minute to talk to them. Xianwu turns around with his usual friendly smile, showing himself completely available to listen to what his friends have to say. She greets the newcomers Yuan and Subin cheerfully, asking the reason for all the sudden excitement between the two. Yuan excitedly holds out her phone and tells Xianwu to take a look at the screen immediately, catching her by surprise. The friend explains that Xianwu ended up appearing for a brief second in one of her daily videos that she usually posts online for fun. To everyone's surprise, the pretty girl's quick appearance caused the video's views to explode absurdly overnight. Yuan excitedly shows that the comments section is full of people begging to see Xianwu in more videos and asking if they are best friends. Xianwu bursts into laughter at the story, while her colleague excitedly recounts how everyone on the internet was completely captivated by her beauty. The other friend jokingly asks if Yuan will finally become a famous digital influencer because of this sudden success. Taking advantage of the excitement, Yuan invites Xianwu to record a full, real video diary together, promising to buy him a delicious snack as soon as the channel is monetized. Even though she was surprised by the unusual proposal, the pretty girl accepted the invitation with a kind smile and agreed to participate in the recording. Meanwhile, the school's outdoor courtyard remains sunny during the students' break time. With an extremely focused and concentrated gaze, Jason prepares to outline the ultimate plan for today. Walking down the hallway alongside his imaginary friend, Jinyang receives the direct mission of inviting Xianwu to have lunch together at the cafeteria today. The boy hesitates, worried, questioning whether such a direct approach might be too obvious, but Jason dismisses his friend's fears immediately. The big guy argues that, for someone who has decided to overcome past traumas and truly connect with the girl, a simple invitation like this is just the first step in the necessary training. Encouraged by the advisor's wise words, Jinyang decides to gather all his inner courage and focus entirely on achieving his goal. He approaches Xianwu's office door with his heart in his throat, mentally rehearsing how he will make the approach. The boy opens the door with a shy wave, ready to strike up a conversation with the girl in the most natural way possible. But he freezes at the entrance when he sees a real commotion of girls surrounding Xianwu, recording videos with their cell phones and laughing scandalously. The pretty girl poses smiling, making a peace sign for her friend's camera, completely surrounded by attention and spotlights. Seeing how busy and involved she seems with the group, Jinyang immediately becomes discouraged and concludes that this is the worst possible time to try to get closer to her. Feeling out of place, the boy decides to quietly turn around and talk to her at a more relaxed time. Just then, Xianwu notices his silhouette receding out of the corner of his eye and turns in surprise towards the door. She watches the boy walk away in absolute silence, feeling a pang in her chest for not having been able to speak to him. The girl looked away thoughtfully, inwardly lamenting that frustrating missed connection in the middle of the classroom. Jinyong walks away dejectedly, lamenting the utter failure of his grand mission to invite her to lunch today. The boy becomes convinced that the plan went completely wrong simply because she is a girl who is too busy and popular for his advances. The sky above the school takes on reddish hues once again with the arrival of another autumn sunset. Walking back home with Jason on his shoulder, Jinyong tries to console himself by rationalizing that Xianwu's immense popularity makes this kind of barrier unavoidable. He admits, surprised, that he had no idea she had so many close friends at school, while watching from afar as the silhouette of someone familiar appears on the path. His calm is interrupted when a familiar voice excitedly shouts his name from afar. Jinyong turns around in surprise and comes face to face with Xianwu, waving cheerfully and playfully asking if he was talking to himself again. The boy immediately panics and stammers, trying to deny the accusation, while the girl simply laughs at his embarrassed reaction. She gives him a friendly pat on the back, laughing at his apologies, teasing him about having some secret imaginary friend he often chats with on the street. Luckily for the boy, Xianwu changes the subject by complaining that she forgot her bus fare again, and Jinyong promptly offers to walk her home. But before the two can start walking together, a voice from behind calls out shrilly for Xianwu. It's Yuan and Subin, who approach waving and celebrating the great coincidence of bumping into each other in the middle of the sidewalk. Xianwu greets her friends somewhat awkwardly, and Yuan asks if she's very busy at that moment. The friend excitedly suggests they take advantage of the chance encounter to finally record that video diary for the internet, stopping talking as soon as she notices the young man beside her. Yuan notices Jinyong and asks in surprise if Xianwu is with the boy, leaving her friend quite embarrassed by the question. Sensing the romantic atmosphere, Subin pulls her friend aside and whispers that they both need to understand the situation and leave the couple alone. The friends wave goodbye excitedly, insisting that Xianwu record with them tomorrow without fail and warning that they will leave them alone today. As they walk away, Subin questions whether they're asking too much of their friend, but Yuan downplays the situation, assuring her that everything is fine and that Xianwu is too nice to refuse. However, as soon as he hears that comment about his kindness, Xianwu's expression changes drastically to a frightened and deeply uncomfortable look. Jinyong silently watches the girls continue to walk away as they plan to make it up to their friend, with a simple snack after using her image. The boy is intrigued, wondering if those girls are really close friends of hers, realizing how little he actually knows about Xianwu's social circle. He remembers Sukyoung mentioning how popular her friend was with everyone at school, and glances sideways at the pretty girl. But the boy's eyes widen behind his glasses when he notices an unexpected reaction on her face. Jinyong notices that the girl has an extremely sad and dejected expression, looking at the ground with eyes full of melancholy. Startled by the drastic change in mood, the boy quickly asks if something is wrong with her. The boy tries to decipher the mystery behind Xianwu's heavy and somber expression. The girl lets out a long, heavy sigh, trying to contain the anguish in her chest. But in a split second, she forces a radiant smile and begins gesticulating cheerfully, calling herself a complete idiot to disguise the awkward moment. Xianwu takes his transportation card out of his bag and lies, saying he just remembered he had already recharged it the day before. She makes up a story about having an important commitment elsewhere and declines Jinyong's company, leaving the boy with little choice but to agree. The girl says goodbye with a quick wave and runs off hurriedly down the street, leaving the boy alone on the sidewalk. Jinyong watches her walk away, feeling that the girl's forced and sudden reaction has generated an enormous and bizarre feeling of discomfort within him. The boy tries to process that strange feeling of incoherence he just felt coming from her. He remembers that his colleague Juman had already warned him about Xianwu, carrying that same air of mystery and inconsistency in his daily actions. The boy clenches his fists tightly, realizing that his classmates' warnings about her oddities finally make perfect sense to him. Jason appears in his friend's mind with his arms crossed, pointing out how bizarre it was that Xianwu was so shaken and rushed away from that simple situation with her colleagues. The imaginary friend declares that this action is definitive proof of the mystery surrounding her life and questions Jinyong about what his attitude will be from now on. Jason asks directly if the boy is willing to investigate thoroughly what is happening behind Xianwu's facade. Jinyong answers with determination that yes, because he knows that unraveling this mystery is the only way to truly get closer to her. Jason grins contentedly from behind his imposing mustache and announces that it's time to give his friend his next crucial school assignment. Night falls over the neighborhood park, covering the courts and benches with a silent atmosphere of mystery. Jason's advice to the boy was to contact and summon the person closest to Xianwu whom he knew personally. Jinyong waits anxiously at the agreed-upon location, determined to delve deep in search of answers about his beloved secrets. It doesn't take long for Sukyoung to appear walking through the park wearing her beige coat, questioning why he called her to talk so late at night. The girl jokingly suggests that he shouldn't fall in love with her, but Jinyong's serious expression makes it clear that the topic of conversation for the evening is entirely about Xianwu. The two face each other in the middle of the deserted square, ready to begin a much deeper investigation into the life of her childhood friend.